I'm just a waiter. That's how my son introduced me at his son's engagement party. He raised his glass, smiled at the hundreds of guests, and added, "My father isn't here anymore." I stood less than 10 steps away from him, holding a tray of drinks silent in the very house I had once bought, until a man walked in, stopped abruptly in the hall, and stared at me. "Wait, are you the one?" The room fell silent, and at that very moment my son's face turned pale. "I truly appreciate your presence. Which part of the globe are you representing today? Let me know your location in the comments. Also, keep in mind that this story features fictional touches for educational impact. Any likeness to events or names is purely unintentional, but the insights I'm sharing are meant to be a powerful guide for you. Wednesday, May 12th, 2022, 3:17 p.m. I steered my battered 2009 Honda Civic into the circular driveway of what was once my home, a sprawling Hamptons estate with white columns and manicured lawns that stretched toward the Atlantic. The estate I bought back in 1985. The one I had signed over to my son Julian 2 years ago, when I naively believed that transferring ownership would lighten his financial burden and show my trust. Now, as I parked near the service entrance, the irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to walk into a party celebrating my grandson Marcus's engagement, not as the proud grandfather, but as the hired help. My phone buzzed. "Julian. Dad, you're late. The caterer needs you inside. Don't embarrass us. Put on the uniform and stay out of sight until we need you." 70 years old, a retired chief of neurosurgery at Memorial Hospital, holder of 8 patents in neurosurgical robotics, and my own son was ordering me to wear a server's uniform. I'd performed over 4,000 surgeries, trained half the neurosurgeons on the East Coast, and saved lives that other doctors had written off. None of that mattered here. In Julian's world, I was the burden, the outdated relic, the man who didn't fit the Vanderbilt family's polished image. I glanced at the back seat where a crisp white server's jacket and black bow tie sat folded beside a box of wine glasses. Julian had dropped them off last week with a curt note, "Wear this Saturday. Don't argue." I hadn't argued. I never did. Because despite everything, I love my son. I love my grandsons. And some foolish, stubborn part of me still believed that if I played along, if I showed up and helped Julian, might finally see me as more than a disappointment. At 3:32, I walked through the service entrance. The kitchen buzzed with controlled chaos. 3 chefs plating appetizers, 2 assistants arranging champagne flutes, and a young woman in a headset barking orders. She glanced at me, then at her clipboard. "You the extra server Julian said you'd be here. Change in the pantry. Party starts at 5. You're on wine duty. Poor smile. Stay invisible." Stay invisible. The words echoed as I pulled on the uniform. It fit perfectly because, of course, Julian had my measurements. He'd thought of everything, except my dignity. At 4:05, I heard voices in the foyer. Julian's confident baritone, Clarissa's high-pitched laugh, Marcus's easy charm, and then a small voice calling my name. Grandpa Arthur's Sophie, my 8-year-old granddaughter, the only person in this family who still looked at me with warmth. She darted into the kitchen before anyone could stop her pigtails bouncing eyes bright. "Grandpa, you're here. Are you coming to the party?" Taspizbo. I knelt down, ignoring the ache in my knees. "I'll be around, sweetheart. You go have fun. Why are you dressed like that?" Before I could answer, Clarissa appeared in the doorway, immaculate in a cream dress and pearls. Her smile was thin. "Sophie, darling, Grandpa's helping today. Run along." She waited until Sophie skipped away, then turned to me. Her voice dropped. "Arthur Julian made it very clear. You're here to work, not to socialize. The Vanderbilts arrive at 5. Please don't make this awkward." I nodded. She left. I stood alone in that pantry, surrounded by expensive wine and imported cheeses, and felt the weight of 36 years of single parenthood, of missed sleep and double shifts, of putting Julian through medical school and covering his student loans, of every sacrifice I'd made to give him the life I never had. And none of it had bought me a seat at his table. At 4:48, I took my position near the French doors leading to the garden terrace. The house had transformed. Crystal chandeliers glowed. A string quartet tuned their instruments. Waiters circulated with silver trays. And I stood there, a ghost in my own home, holding a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2015 worth more than my monthly rent. The first guests arrived promptly at 5. I poured. I smiled. I stayed invisible. I watched Julian greet the Vanderbilts, Richard Vanderbilt, silver-haired and commanding, and his wife Catherine, elegant and sharp-eyed. Their daughter Isabella stood beside them, poised and beautiful, the perfect match for Marcus. Julian was in his element, charming and confident every inch the successful cosmetic surgeon. Clarissa glided through the crowd, in a designer gown I knew cost more than I earned in a month from my small consulting gigs. No one introduced me, no one acknowledged me. I was part of the furniture. At 5:34, as I refilled a guest's glass, I overheard a conversation near the terrace. Richard Vanderbilt's voice carried. "Julian, I must say this estate is magnificent. Your family has excellent taste." Julian smiled. "Thank you, sir. We've worked hard to maintain it. My estate, my 41 years of mortgage payments, my name on the original deed." But I said nothing. I moved through the crowd pouring wine, collecting empty glasses invisible. A woman in diamonds complimented the hors d'oeuvres without looking at me. A young man in a designer suit handed me his empty plate without a word of thanks. And through it all, I watched my son laugh and network and build his image, while I served the people he wanted to impress. At 6:02, Marcus and Isabella took the small stage Julian had set up near the garden fountain. Marcus beamed. "Thank you all for coming. Isabella and I are thrilled to celebrate with you tonight." The crowd applauded. I stood in the shadows holding a tray of champagne flutes and wondered when exactly I had become so small in my son's eyes. The evening was just beginning, but somewhere deep inside a decision was forming. A line was being drawn. I didn't know it yet, but this night would change everything. By 5 o'clock I had become what Julian always wanted me to be: invisible. The atmosphere was straight from a high society gala, featuring elegant white canopies, glowing vintage bulbs, and the refined notes of a string quartet echoing near the fountain, and 150 guests in cocktail attire laughing over glasses of Veuve Clicquot. The Atlantic glittered gold in the late afternoon sun. Everything was perfect. Everything except the 70-year-old neurosurgeon carrying a tray of wine glasses through a crowd that looked straight through him. "Hey, Chardonnay." A man in a linen blazer snapped his fingers without making eye contact. I poured. He turned away mid-pour to resume his conversation. No thank you. No acknowledgement. I was a fixture, like the ice sculpture melting slowly near the bar. These hands had performed a 12-hour craniotomy on a Supreme Court justice in 2019. Now they poured wine for people who would forget this party by Monday. I moved through the crowd, catching fragments of conversation. Near the terrace, a woman in diamonds leaned toward Julian. "This estate is absolutely stunning. How long have you owned it?" Julian smiled, expansive and warm. "Family property. I've invested heavily in it over the years." A lie? I noted it the way a surgeon notes an irregular heartbeat. The estate was mine, bought in 1985, mortgage paid off in 2003, deeded to Julian in 2024 because I thought it would ease his financial stress. But, to hear him tell it, he'd built this empire himself. A woman near the fountain dropped her napkin. It landed at my feet. She didn't glance down. I picked it up, handed it to her. She took it without looking at me and continued her conversation. I passed a mirror in the tent. For a moment I didn't recognize the man staring back, an old man in a server's uniform, forgettable, erased. From an upstairs window, Sophie waved. I smiled. Julian saw, frowned, and pulled the curtain shut. By 6 o'clock, Julian was in full form. He stood near the garden steps surrounded by 3 business associates, gesturing with the confident energy of a man who had never doubted his own success. "My company, Sterling Medical Solutions, is pioneering robotic surgical technology," he said, voice rich with authority. "We're in final negotiations for several critical patents. Once secured, we'll revolutionize the field." I stopped a few feet away, refilling wine glasses at a nearby table, listening. One of the associates, a man in his 50s with silver cufflinks, nodded approvingly. "Impressive, Julian. A real self-made success. Your parents must be very proud." Julian's face flickered just for a second, a hesitation so brief most people would miss it. "My parents aren't with us anymore. I built this on my own. Not with us anymore. Not dead, not estranged. Just erased." I stood 12 feet away. He knew I could hear him. Clarissa swept in, resplendent in a cream silk gown. "Darling, the Vanderbilts just called. Isabella's arriving early. Her parents will be here at 7:30. Julian's smile tightened. "Early white geek." She said she wanted to observe before her parents arrived. "You know these CFO types." Clarissa's tone was light, but her eyes were sharp. Julian exhaled. "Make sure everything is perfect. This deal is everything. This deal is everything. Not this celebration. Not Marcus's engagement. The deal. I refilled a woman's glass. She didn't notice. Across the terrace, Julian continued his performance. The technology we're developing will reduce surgical recovery time by 40%. We're talking about a paradigm shift. Another associate raised his glass. To paradigm shifts. They toasted. I moved on. A man near the bar mentioned Sterling Medical Solutions, in passing something about patent filings. Julian's head snapped around. He laughed loud and jovial, and steered the conversation toward the Hamptons real estate market. Smooth, practiced, deflecting. I made another mental note. At 6:45, a Blacktown car pulled into the circular drive. Isabella Vanderbilt stepped out, tall, elegant, mid-30s, dressed in a tailored navy suit that said CFO louder than any business card. She surveyed the estate with the clinical precision of someone who assessed risk for a living. Julian practically sprinted to greet her, his enthusiasm a shade too bright. Isabella, wonderful that you could come early. I like to get a feel for people in their environment. She said, her tone pleasant but measured. You understand. I was nearby, preparing a wine station. She glanced at me, not recognition, just cataloging. An old server, part of the backdrop. Julian gestured toward the terrace. This is the main patio, ocean view. We host quarterly events here. Beautiful property, Isabella said. Yours? Yes, well, family estate. I've managed it directly. Technically not a lie, but not the truth either. My name was still on the deed. I'd never transferred full ownership, just given Julian power of attorney over the property. Isabella's gaze swept the grounds. And your family? Will I meet them tonight? Julian hesitated. My wife Clarissa you've met, and my daughter Sophie is upstairs. Your parents? They're not present. My father is traveling. I stood 15 feet away, pouring Pinot Grigio. I heard every word. Isabella's eyes flicked toward me, the old man in the server's uniform, then back to Julian. Traveling, I see. Well, my father always appreciates medical professionals. He's quite curious about the field. Julian's smile was smooth. Of course. Perhaps we can discuss the technology tonight. Isabella nodded, but I caught her scanning the crowd, noting details Julian didn't realize she was observing. The way Clarissa's designer gown probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The catering staff's choreographed efficiency. The small inconsistencies in Julian's story. At 6:52, I refilled Isabella's glass. Our eyes met for half a second. Thank you, she said, the only person all evening who had acknowledged my existence. I nodded and moved on. I didn't know then that she'd heard my name before, or that in 90 minutes she would be the one to connect the dots and unravel my son's carefully constructed lies. At 7:32, Maximilian Vanderbilt stepped out of his limousine. I know the exact time because I'd checked my watch, wondering how much longer I needed to stay. 60 seconds later, my son's world began to collapse. The sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The party had hit its stride, guests laughing over champagne. The string quartet playing something elegant and forgettable, Edison bulbs glowing against the coming dusk. I was restocking the wine station near the entrance tent, trying to remain unnoticed, when the black limousine pulled into the circular drive. I recognized Maximilian Vanderbilt immediately. 3 years ago, his father had been my patient. Emergency aneurysm surgery, touch and go. 12 hours in the OR, every other surgeon at Memorial saying it was impossible, too risky. The patient too frail. I'd done it anyway, because that's what you do. When someone's life is on the line, you don't calculate odds, you calculate options. My hands tightened on the wine bottle. Should I leave, slip away through the service entrance? But I didn't move. Julian sprinted forward, arms wide, smile bright. Mr. Vanderbilt, Mrs. Vanderbilt, we're so honored you could join us. The boss says you could pass by. Maximilian was gracious, silver-haired, and distinguished in a tailored tuxedo. His wife, elegant in pearls and a champagne-colored gown, took his arm. Thank you for the invitation, Julian. Isabella speaks very highly of your work. But Maximilian's eyes were already scanning the crowd, searching for something, someone, the host, the man of the house. His gaze stopped on me. 15 feet away, in a server's uniform, holding a bottle of wine. He froze mid-stride. Maximilian stared. I watched the thoughts turning over in his mind, recognition struggling against context, memory colliding with reality. He started walking toward me. Julian tried to intercept. Mr. Vanderbilt, can I offer you a drink first? The bar is just over. Maximilian walked past him, eyes locked on me. I set down the wine bottle, straightened my spine. Something shifted inside me, muscle memory from 40 years of commanding operating rooms. My shoulders squared, my chin lifted. Maximilian stopped 3 feet away, studying my face. "Dr. Sterling, Arthur Sterling." My voice came out steady. "Hello, Maximilian." I saw his eyes travel down to the uniform, the bow tie, the name tag that read Staff. What are you doing here?" Behind him, Julian had gone pale. "I'm helping my son prepare for his party." Maximilian's confusion deepened. "Helping your dress like Julian Sterling is your son?" "Yes." Maximilian turned to Julian. "Your father is Dr. Arthur Sterling. Arthur Sterling who saved my father's life?" Julian's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Guests were starting to notice the commotion. Conversations died. Heads turned. Isabella moved closer to her father. "Dad, what's going on?" Maximilian's voice carried louder, now shock overriding discretion. "This is Dr. Sterling, the surgeon I told you about. The one who performed the surgery everyone said was impossible." He gestured at me still in my server's uniform, and I saw the exact moment comprehension hit him. His face shifted confusion to understanding to something close to rage. "Why are you dressed as a server? At your own son's parties, Eats. Before I could answer, Julian intervened. "Dad, please not here." "Dad," a guest nearby overheard. "That's your father?" Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Isabella pulled out her phone, typed something scrolled, then showed her father the screen. Maximilian nodded slowly. "That's him." She turned to Julian, her voice cool and measured. "You told us your father was traveling." Julian stammered. "I can explain..." "Explain what?" Maximilian's voice cut through the twilight air. "Why one of the most accomplished neurosurgeons on the East Coast is wearing a server's uniform at his own son's engagement party sees. En derbeu sarkstad bites." Clarissa appeared confusion written across her face. "What's happening, Julian?" Maximilian addressed the growing crowd, his voice carrying authority honed in decades of boardrooms. "This man saved my father's life 3 years ago. A 12-hour surgery. Every other surgeon said it was impossible, too dangerous. My father would die on the table." He looked at me, and I saw something like reverence in his eyes. "Dr. Sterling didn't just save him, he gave us 3 more years with him. 3 years we never thought we'd have." The crowd was silent now, 150 people watching this unfold. Maximilian turned back to Julian, and the reverence vanished, replaced by cold contempt. "He's a pioneer in robotic surgery. He's trained half the neurosurgeons in this region, and you..." He looked Julian up and down. "You made him dress like hired help." The silence was suffocating. I could hear the waves crashing on the shore, the breeze rustling the tent canvas, the sudden absence of the string quartet, who had stopped playing mid-phrase. I spoke quietly, but clearly. "I'm his father. He asked me to help prepare for the party. I thought he wanted me here." The admission hung in the air, naked and raw. Clarissa's voice was barely a whisper. "Your father? This is your father?" Julian tried again. "I can explain," but I saw it on his face. Not guilt, not remorse, panic. The panic of a dealmaker watching a contract fall apart. Maximilian's jaw tightened. "I came here tonight prepared to discuss a major partnership, a multi-million-dollar investment in Sterling Medical Solutions." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "But I will not do business with a man who treats his father, a man of Dr. Sterling's stature, like this." Mrs. Vanderbilt touched her husband's arm gently. "Maximilian, perhaps we should..." "No." His voice was firm. "I've seen enough." He turned to me, extended his hand. I shook it. "Dr. Sterling, it's an honor to see you again. I only wish it were under different circumstances." "As do I, Maximilian." He nodded, then turned to Isabella. "We're leaving." Isabella looked at Marcus. Poor Marcus caught in the wreckage of his engagement party, then at Julian. Her expression was unreadable. "I need some time to think." She followed her parents toward the limousine. Julian finally found his voice. "Mr. Vanderbilt? Wait, please. This is a misunderstanding." Maximilian stopped, turned. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but every word landed like a gavel. "The only misunderstanding here, Julian, is that I almost went into business with you." He got into the limousine. The door closed. The car pulled away. The party had become a tableau of stunned silence. 150 guests staring. The ocean breeze rustling the tent. Clarissa frozen in place. Marcus looking lost. And Julian standing in the middle of it all, watching his deal, his future disappear down the driveway. He turned to me. For just a moment, just a flicker, I saw something that might have been shame. But then his jaw set, his eyes hardened, and I realized he wasn't ashamed of hurting me. He was ashamed of being caught. And that's when I understood we'd crossed a line we could never come back from. The silence lasted about 15 seconds. Then someone pulled out a phone. Robert, a real estate attorney, and he was about to expose Julian's first concrete lie on the spot. Julian, earlier you said this was your property. Robert's tone was casual, genuinely curious, rather than confrontational. He was the kind of lawyer who fact-checked reflexively, the way some people check the weather. Julian's response came fast defensive. Family estate, yes. I'm a real estate attorney. Force of habit, I always check property records. Let me just... Robert tapped his screen, the blue glow illuminating his face in the gathering dusk. Around us, guests who had started to drift toward the exits stopped, sensing fresh drama. Julian tried to intercept. That's really not necessary. Public records, Robert said mildly. Takes 2 seconds. Property at 47 Ocean Drive, Southampton? He paused. His eyebrows rose. Huh. Owner of record Arthur James Sterling. Purchased July 1995. He turned his phone toward nearby guests. They craned to look. I watched the information spread through the crowd, like ripples in waterheads tilting toward other heads. Whispers starting. Phones coming out. Clarissa's voice cut through the murmur. What? No, that's wrong. Julian, tell them. I spoke for the first time since my identity had been exposed, my voice quiet, but carrying in the stillness. The house is in my name. It always has been. Clarissa spun toward Julian, and I saw the exact moment comprehension began to crack through her carefully maintained composure. You told me you bought this house before we met. Julian's hands came up placating, desperate. I managed it, I renovated it, I invested. I interrupted gently. With money I gave you, Julian. The words landed like stones in still water. Around us I could feel the shift in the crowd from shocked spectators to something harder, colder. Judgment. Clarissa pulled Julian aside, but not far enough. We all heard. Her voice was rising, control slipping. We don't own this house. Julian kept his voice low, trying to contain the damage. It's complicated. Dad transferred control to me. Control isn't ownership. I've been telling people this is our estate. She turned to the remaining guests, humiliation flooding her face. I apologize. I've been misinformed. She turned back to Julian, and her voice climbed another notch. What else don't we own? Clarissa, please not here. But she was already pulling out her phone fingers, flying across the screen. Texting someone. Her lawyer, her sister. I couldn't tell, but I recognized the body language of a woman, realizing she'd been living in a fiction. Near the bar, a guest whispered just loud enough for me to catch it. Imagine living in your father's house and treating him like the help. Another voice, equally low but sharp with contempt. And lying about it. That's the part I can't understand. Isabella approached me quietly, her earlier professional reserve replaced by something genuine embarrassment, maybe, or concern. Dr. Sterling, I'm so sorry. If we'd known, you couldn't have known, I said. My son has become very good at creating illusions. Maximilian joined us, his expression grave. Arthur, I need to be frank. This changes our business discussion significantly. I nodded. I understand. Julian overheard panic flashing across his face. No, wait. This is just a misunderstanding about property titles. Maximilian's voice was quiet but final. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is deception, about something fundamental. He didn't say the rest, but I heard it anyway. If you'll lie about this, what else are you lying about? It was the question every businessman learned to ask. The question that killed deals before they started. Guests were leaving now, offering those small, polite excuses people use when they want to escape awkwardness. Early meeting tomorrow. Feeling a bit tired. No one wanted to stay for whatever came next, but some did stay, the ones who valued drama over discretion, who would dine out on this story for months. Movement caught my eye. Sophie appeared on the upstairs balcony, her small face visible through the railings. She was crying. She'd seen everything. At 8 years old, she'd watched her grandfather humiliated, watched her father's lies exposed, watched her family unravel in real time. I waved to her, tried to smile. She waved back, small hand moving slowly. Clarissa saw her, went pale, and rushed toward the house. Someone needs to get her away from the window. Julian stood alone in the middle of the lawn, his party, his guests, his lies. Everything collapsing in real time. He looked at me. I looked back. For a moment, just a breath, I thought he might apologize, might explain, might show something human. Instead, this is your fault. You should have stayed in the background like I asked. The words hung in the air between us. I felt something shift inside me, surprise, giving way to a strange, cold clarity. My fault. You should have let me handle this. But you had to talk to them. Had to make it about you. His voice was rising now, anger overriding self-preservation. Around us, the remaining guests had gone silent, listening. I realized with a kind of detached fascination that he actually believed this, that I had sabotaged him. Not that he'd sabotaged himself by building a life on lies, but that I, by simply existing, by being recognized, had destroyed him. Julian, I said quietly, I didn't make you tell people this was your house. I didn't make you dress me as a server. I didn't make you tell the Vanderbilts I was traveling. I paused. I didn't make you ashamed of me. I'm not, he stopped. Even he couldn't finish that sentence. Robert was still standing nearby, phone in hand, and I saw him tap his screen again. Curiosity, maybe, or professional thoroughness. Whatever he was looking up, his expression shifted surprise. Then something that looked like concern. He glanced at me, then at Julian, but said nothing. Whatever he'd found, he was keeping it to himself. For now. Julian turned and walked toward the house, shoulders rigid with anger. Clarissa intercepted him at the door. I couldn't hear their words, but I could read her body language, sharp gestures, pulling away from his reaching hand. Behind them, through the French doors, I could see into the house. My house. The house I'd bought 31 years ago, hoping to build a legacy. Instead, I'd built a cage for lies, and tonight I'd opened the door. The lawn was nearly empty now. A few servers cleaning up, moving through the wreckage with professional efficiency. The string quartet had packed up and left. The Edison bulb still glowed against the darkening sky, pretty and pointless. I stood there still in my server's uniform and wondered what happened next. Whether I should leave, whether I should stay. Whether there was anything left to salvage. Through the French doors, I watched Clarissa push past Julian and disappear into the house. He stood framed in the doorway, backlit and alone. 31 years ago, I'd walked through that same door for the first time, carrying Julian in my arms. He'd been 3 months old, and I'd just bought us a home. I'd thought I was giving him everything. I hadn't realized I was teaching him to take. I shouldn't have followed them inside. It wasn't my business anymore if it ever had been. But I heard Clarissa's voice rising, and I needed to know, was there anything left in my son worth salvaging? The French doors stood open. Through them, I could see Clarissa tearing through desk drawers and Julian's study papers, scattering like leaves. Julian stood in the doorway trying to block her path, his voice tight with panic. What are you looking for? Our prenuptial agreement. Where is it? Clarissa, now isn't the time. Find it. More papers. A filing cabinet yanked open. She pulled out a leather folder, flipped it open, began reading. Her face went pale. She stepped onto the patio where I stood, still reading, and when she looked up and saw me, something in her eyes had changed. Not contempt anymore. Fear. She read aloud, her voice shaking. Section 7.2. All assets acquired during the marriage from family sources remain the separate property of the receiving party. She looked at Julian. Everything came from your father. Not everything. She kept reading, her voice climbing. In the event of divorce, Party B retains only assets in her name and direct earnings. She turned to me. You wrote this. My attorney did. I insisted on those terms. Why? I paused, chose honesty. Because I saw who you were before Julian realized it. The words landed like a slap. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw her recalculating everything. Not just her marriage, her entire life. Robert was still there, standing near the patio entrance, and I realized he'd followed us in out of professional curiosity, or perhaps just human fascination with disaster. He spoke carefully. Julian, didn't you start your company with family investment capital? It's core. Julian's response was automatic defensive. That's private business. I decided enough secrets. $2 million. I gave him the seed capital in 2015. Maximilian was still on the patio, hadn't left yet, and his head turned sharply at that. Gave or loaned? Silent investment with conditions. My attorney structured it as a loan recallable under certain circumstances. I pulled out my phone, found the document, showed it to Maximilian. He read it, eyebrows rising. if the borrower damages the relationship with the lender severely, you can recall the entire investment with 30 days notice. Yes. Julian's voice cracked. Dad, you wouldn't... Are you sure after tonight? Clarissa was laughing now, a sound with no humor in it, brittle and strange. So, the company isn't even yours. It's my company, I build it, I run it. With Dad's money, I said quietly. Dad's initial capital, which your entire operation is mortgaged against. Clarissa turned to Julian, her voice deadly calm now. What happens if your father recalls the loan? Silence. Robert, ever the helpful attorney, filled it. If it's structured the way I suspect, the company would have 30 days to repay or face liquidation. Clarissa's eyes never left Julian. How much do we have in savings? Julian wouldn't look at her. Julian, how much? About 40,000. And the loan is 2 million. He nodded. Clarissa removed her wedding ring, set it on the patio table with a small, definitive clink that seemed to echo in the silence. I'm calling my attorney, tonight. Julian grabbed her arm. Clarissa, please, we can work this out. She yanked free and I saw real fury in her face now cutting through the fear. Don't touch me. She turned to me and her voice was cold, controlled. Did you plan this? Set him up to fail? No, I hoped he'd succeed, but I protected my assets in case he didn't. You knew he'd fail. I knew his character. Business results were his to determine. Julian exploded. My character! You never trusted me. I looked him straight in the eye. I trusted you for 42 years. You're the one who stopped trusting me. The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment I thought I saw something crack in his face, some recognition, some understanding. But it passed too quickly, replaced by anger, by the desperate need to make this someone else's fault. Clarissa's voice cut through. What else the car you drive, whose name is on the registration? Julian said nothing. The boat you sold last year, did we actually own it? It was Dad's. He let me borrow it. Everything. Her voice was barely a whisper now, but it carried. Everything is his. She walked inside. I heard footsteps on the stairs, packing, moving fast, efficient like someone who'd been planning this escape route for longer than she'd admitted to herself. Julian stood there watching his marriage end in real time. He turned to me, and his face was a mask of rage and something that might have been grief. Are you happy now? Do I look happy? You got what you wanted. You destroyed everything. I didn't destroy anything, Julian. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your choices. The distinction seemed to baffle him. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. And maybe I was. The language of accountability. The language of consequences. It was one he'd never learned because I'd never taught it. Behind us, I heard voices. Some guests were still lingering, drawn by drama like moths to flame. Someone's phone was out. Recording, probably. Julian's humiliation was being documented in real time for social media, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness, just a strange hollow peace. Julian moved to the edge of the patio, gripped the railing with both hands. His knuckles went white. What do you want from me? I wanted you to see me, to acknowledge me, to treat me like I mattered. I paused. But not like this. Never like this. And then what am I supposed to do now? I don't know, Julian. That's for you to figure out. He looked at me, and for just a second, I saw the little boy I'd raised alone, the 3-month-old I'd carried through that front door 31 years ago, the toddler who'd reached for me when he fell, the teenager who'd asked for my advice. But that boy was gone or buried so deep under layers of ego and desperation that I couldn't reach him anymore. Upstairs, I heard a door slam, Clarissa's voice talking on her phone. The word attorney carried down the stairs. Julian's shoulders sagged. He looked smaller, suddenly deflated. You're really gonna take it all, aren't you? I haven't decided. But you could. Yes. He nodded slowly, processing that. Then he straightened, and when he looked at me again, his eyes were hard. Get out of my house. It's my house, Julian. That's the whole problem. I turned and walked toward the French doors. Behind me, I heard him say something else, something about lawyers, about fighting this. But I kept walking, out onto the patio, past the remaining guests, who parted like water, across the lawn where the party had been, now littered with abandoned champagne glasses and crushed napkins. At the edge of the property, I looked back. Julian stood framed in the doorway, backlit and alone, gripping the railing like it was the only solid thing left in his world. And maybe it was. I felt like a surgeon who'd done everything possible, and now could only wait to see if the patient would survive. I was halfway across the lawn when Maximilian cleared his throat. I think there's something else people should know about what Dr. Sterling did for Julian 15 years ago. I stopped, turned. About 40 guests remained, now the ones too invested in the drama to leave, or perhaps too decent to abandon me in the wreckage of my son's making. They formed a loose semicircle on the patio, backlit by the house lights, and I felt like I was standing in an impromptu courtroom. Maximilian addressed the remaining crowd, his voice carrying that boardroom authority he'd probably honed over decades. 3 years ago, Dr. Sterling saved my father's life. But that wasn't his first miracle. He turned to Isabella. Show them. Isabella was already scrolling on her tablet, and I realized she'd been researching, while the rest of us were focused on the financial revelations. She found what she was looking for and held it up to her father. He nodded. There's an article from 2008, Memorial Hospital. Isabella's voice was clear, professional, the voice of someone used to presenting evidence. She read the headline, Surgeon Saves Son's Life in Emergency Operation. Oh, she paused. Everyone looked at Julian. Dr. Arthur Sterling performed emergency brain surgery on his son, Julian, age 27, following a severe car accident. The surgery lasted 18 hours. Isabella's eyes flicked to Julian, then back to the screen. Anne was deemed nearly impossible by other surgeons. Dr. Sterling, working without sleep, successfully repaired multiple skull fractures and stopped critical brain hemorrhaging. A guest near me gasped. You saved his life, his actual life. I nodded. Yes. Julian's voice was tight, strangled. That was 15 years ago. It's not relevant. Maximilian cut him off. Not relevant? Your father performed an 18-hour surgery, saved your life, and you repay him by treating him like the help. The question hung in the air, unanswerable, damning. I spoke quietly. Julian, show them. No. Show them the scar. Dad, don't. Take off the hairpiece. There was a long pause. Julian wore an expensive toupee. Everyone knew it. No one mentioned it. It was one of those polite fictions we all maintained. But tonight we were done with fictions. He removed it slowly like shedding armor. The scar became visible across his scalp, partially obscured by the hair he still had. A precise line. The precision of surgery. My work. Gasps from the guests who hadn't known. I stepped closer. That's Dad's work. July 23rd, 2008. You were drunk, self-inflicted accident, hit a telephone pole. Julian flinched. Your skull was fractured in 3 places. Brain hemorrhage. 3 other surgeons said you'd die on the table. I said I could save you. I remembered his hand in mine when he woke up. He'd been drugged, barely conscious, his eyes struggling to focus. He'd whispered, "Thank you, Dad." Just those 3 words, slurred and soft. But I'd heard them. I'd thought they meant he understood. That he'd remember. That we'd be closer after I'd literally held his brain in my hands and put it back together. I'd thought saving his life would bridge whatever distance had grown between us. You woke up 3 days later. I continued, my voice steady. Said thank you exactly once, then Clarissa came to visit. I looked at Clarissa, who had appeared at the French doors. Sophie presumably settled upstairs. You told him that doctors save people because it's their job. Told him not to be sentimental. Clarissa went pale. I don't remember saying... I was there, standing in the doorway. You didn't see me. The memory was vivid even now, 15 years later. Standing in the hospital room doorway holding coffee I'd gone to fetch. Watching Clarissa lean over Julian's bed with that expression of mild disapproval she'd perfected. Hearing her say those words with such casual certainty. As if gratitude toward a parent who just saved your life was somehow unseemly. And watching Julian, still weak, still vulnerable, absorb that lesson, like gospel. Julian listened to you, I said to Clarissa, and he never thanked me again. Not once in 15 years. A small voice cut through the tension. Daddy, is that true? Everyone looked up. Sophie stood at the upstairs window, her 8-year-old face pressed against the glass, and I could see tears streaming down her cheeks even from this distance. Julian's voice cracked. Sophie, go to bed! Dad said Grandpa was embarrassing. Sophie called down, her voice carrying in the evening air. But he's a hero. It's complicated. You lied. Sophie was crying harder now, her small hand slapping the window. You said Grandpa was traveling, but he's here, in a uniform, like a servant. Clarissa rushed back inside, presumably to get Sophie away from the window, but the damage was done. A guest near me spoke, his voice thick with disgust. Your daughter doesn't even know her grandfather exists. Julian tried to recover. We're not close. She's met him before. Twice, I interrupted. She's met me twice, both times by accident. You never invited me. Another guest, a woman in pearls who'd been silent until now, spoke up. He saved your life, and you don't let him see his granddaughter. Julian's face was flushed now, a mix of anger and humiliation. You people don't understand our history. Then explain it. The voice came from Robert, still lingering near the patio entrance. Explain to these people why the man who saved your life doesn't deserve to be in it. Julian had no answer. His mouth opened closed. He looked at me, and I saw something that might have been desperation or fury or shame. I couldn't tell anymore, and maybe there was no difference. Maximilian straightened, buttoning his jacket with the finality of a judge delivering a verdict. I've heard enough. Isabella, we're leaving. Dr. Sterling, please call my office Monday. We'll discuss that partnership directly with you, cutting out the middlemen. Julian's head snapped toward him. Wait, the deal was with my company. Was? Maximilian's voice was cold. Past tense. He and Isabella walked toward their car. Julian started to follow, stumbled, caught himself on a patio chair. Mr. Vanderbilt, please, if we could just... But the limousine door was already closing. The engine started. Red tail lights glowed in the darkness. Julian stood there, hairpiece still in his hand. Scar visible, and for the first time all night, he looked small. Not diminished by others, but by his own choices. His own accumulated betrayals coming home to roost. The remaining guests began to leave quietly now, the entertainment over the ugliness too raw to watch anymore. Some nodded to me as they passed. One woman, the one in pearls, stopped, touched my arm gently. You deserve better. And I nodded, not trusting my voice. Within 10 minutes, the lawn was empty except for Julian and me. The caterers had packed up and left. The string quartet was long gone. The Edison bulb still glowed cheerful and oblivious, illuminating nothing but wreckage. Julian put his hairpiece back on with shaking hands. When he looked at me, his eyes were wet, though whether from tears or rage I couldn't say. Are you satisfied now? No, I said simply. I'm not. Then what do you want? I realized with a strange clarity that I didn't know anymore. I'd wanted acknowledgement, respect, love, maybe, though that felt too vulnerable to name. But standing here, watching my son exposed and humiliated, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound aching sadness. I wanted you to remember, I said finally, that I held your life in my hands, that I chose to save you when everyone else said to let you go. I wanted that to matter. It did matter. Did it? He didn't answer. I turned and walked toward my car. Behind me, I heard him say something, a plea or a curse I couldn't tell. I kept walking. I'd performed surgery again tonight. Not on his brain, on his life, cutting away the lies, exposing what lay beneath. Whether he'd survived the operation remained to be seen. The Vanderbilts were gone, but their departure created a vacuum, and into that vacuum stepped Ethan, Julian's business partner, looking like he'd just driven through hell to get here. A Tesla pulled up at 8:35, and Ethan jumped out, still in business, casual khakis and a polo with the Sterling Medical Solutions logo. Julian, sorry I'm late. Traffic on the bridge was... He stopped, saw the remaining crowd, saw Julian's disheveled state, saw me in my server's uniform. What happened? Julian's voice was tight. Marcus, not now. The Vanderbilts were supposed to be here. Where are they? A guest nearby, one of the 20 or so, who'd stayed for the full tragedy, helpfully answered. They left. After learning Julian's father is Dr. Arthur Sterling. The Dr. Arthur Sterling. Ethan looked confused. Your father. You said he passed away. I stepped forward. I'm alive and well. Hello, Marcus. We've spoken on the phone, but never met. Marcus stared at me, and I watched his mind work through the implications. You're Arthur Sterling, the neurosurgeon. Yes. Ethan turned to Julian, his face shifting from confusion to something harder. You told me your father died 5 years ago. I said he was gone from my life. You said died. I sent a condolence card. This was news to me, another lie stacked on top of all the others. Ethan pulled out his tablet, and I recognized the gesture of a man trying to salvage a sinking ship through sheer force of will. Okay. We can handle family issues later. The Vanderbilts did. They discussed the partnership. Julian hedged. They're reconsidering. Reconsidering, Julian, this deal is everything. Our entire business model depends on acquiring those neural sync patents. Oars, and Bobby Opstein endorsed. I went still. Neural sync. Marcus glanced at me, then back to his tablet. The robotic surgery patents, registered under the A.J. Sterling Medical Trust. We've been trying to contact the owner for 6 months. I looked at Julian. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Marcus continued oblivious. We offered $2 million for licensing. No response. The Vanderbilts were going to help us negotiate. I interrupted quietly. A J. Sterling Medical Trust. Arthur James Sterling. That's me. Silence. Marcus's head came up slowly. What? I own those patents. All 47 of them. Filed the first one in 1998. The most recent was filed last year. Marcus turned to Julian with the deliberate care of someone trying very hard not to explode. You knew... Julian tried to salvage it. I knew Dad had some old patents from the 90s. I thought they'd become obsolete. Obsolete, Marcus's voice cracked. Our attorneys told us those patents are foundational. Every robotic surgery system in development touches them. I explained partly because Marcus deserved the truth, and partly because I wanted Julian to understand what he'd built his empire on. Neural Sync isn't a patent. It's an architecture, a system. I've been updating it for 25 years. Anyone doing robotic neurosurgery has to license from me or design around me, and there's no way to design around it. I made sure of that. Marcus sank into a patio chair, his tablet falling to his lap. Your entire pitch to investors was that we were developing advanced robotic technology. But it's based on your father's work. We're innovating on that foundation. Without a license, we've been operating for 3 years, assuming we could acquire those patents. Every investor presentation has pending patent acquisition written all over it. Robert, who'd been lingering near the patio entrance this whole time, bless lawyers and their morbid fascination with disasters, spoke up. If you've been using patented technology without authorization, that's infringement. Marcus dropped his head into his hands. We've demoed our system to 12 hospitals, given them technical specifications. If those specs violate patents, Robert nodded. Every hospital could sue. Every investor could withdraw. The company could be liable for millions. Julian tried one more time. Dad, you wouldn't sue your own son. And no, I agreed. But I won't license a company built on lies either. Marcus looked at me and I saw genuine anguish in his face. Dr. Sterling, I didn't know, I swear. Julian handled all the patent research. He told me everything was fine. I believe you. Marcus started pacing. The Vanderbilts were our last shot. Without their investment and without those patents, we're bankrupt in 6 months. He stopped, turned to Julian. We're already bankrupt. We just don't know it yet. Julian reached for him. Marcus, wait. We can pivot. Find different technology. With what money we're mortgaged to the ceiling. And now, I find out we're mortgaged on a loan from your father. Marcus's laugh was bitter disbelieving. Does anything in this company actually belong to us? I built this company on your father's money, using your father's patents, in your father's house. Marcus picked up his tablet, started walking toward his car. I'm calling an emergency board meeting, Monday morning. Julian, I suggest you bring an attorney. He got into the Tesla, but didn't drive away immediately. For 5 minutes he sat there, head in his hands, and I wondered what he was thinking. About the 3 years he'd invested in this company, about the career he'd staked on Julian's promises, about how he'd explain this to his own family. Finally, the Tesla rolled away. Julian watched his business partner leave, and I watched my son realize he'd built his entire adult life on foundations he'd never bothered to examine. The remaining guests were filtering away now, their phones out. I could imagine the social media posts being drafted. You won't believe what happened at Julian Sterling's party. By morning, this would be everywhere. The medical community was small and gossip traveled fast. Julian stood alone in the center of what used to be his celebration. The Edison bulb still glowed cheerfully overhead, illuminating empty tables and abandoned champagne glasses. Somewhere upstairs, I could hear Clarissa moving around, the sounds of packing drawers opening closet doors, the zip of luggage. He looked at me across the 10 feet of patio that might as well have been miles. Are you going to destroy everything I've built? You didn't build it, Julian. You borrowed it. There's a difference. I worked for it. With my money, on my patents, in my house. I paused. The only thing that was actually yours was the lies. Those you created all on your own. He flinched like I'd struck him. And so what now? You take it all back. Leave me with nothing. In those space that you've heard about. I thought about that. About the little boy I'd raised alone. About the young man I'd saved on an operating table. About the son who'd looked at me tonight in a server's uniform and felt only inconvenience. I haven't decided yet. But you could. Yes. He nodded slowly, and for a moment I thought I saw something like understanding in his face. But it passed quickly, replaced by that familiar mask of grievance. You planned this. All of it. The patents in a trust, the loan structure, the prenup. You were always planning to take everything away. No, I said quietly. I was planning to protect myself in case you became exactly what you are. Turns out I was right to plan. The last guests were leaving now, calling their goodbyes, their voices artificially bright with the forced cheer of people escaping awkwardness. One couple paused by me. Dr. Sterling, if you need anything. Thank you. They left. The caterers had long since packed up and disappeared. The string quartet's equipment was gone. Even the Edison bulbs seemed to be flickering now, as if they too wanted to escape. Julian and I stood there, two strangers in formal wear, one in a tuxedo, one in a server's uniform, and I realized we'd always been strangers. We'd just been pretending otherwise. I should go, I said. This is your house. It is, but you're still my son, for now. I walked toward my car. Behind me I heard him say something, a question or a plea, but I didn't turn around. We were strangers who happened to share DNA and a last name. One of those things was about to change. A young man in a server's uniform approached me while Julian stood frozen in the wreckage of his party. Dr. Sterling. His voice shook slightly. I need to tell you something. I didn't recognize him at first. Just another face in the catering staff, someone Julian had hired to help maintain the illusion of his success. I'm David Martinez. I was at Riverside Orphanage from 2008 to 2015. And then I remembered David. The David who wanted to be a doctor. His eyes welled up. You remembered. Of course I remembered. Julian was watching from across the patio, curious despite himself, drawn to this interaction, like someone watching a car accident unfold. David's voice grew stronger. I'm not a doctor yet, but I'm in medical school. Cornell. Full scholarship from the Margaret Sterling Foundation. I smiled. You earned that yourself. The foundation paid $240,000 for my education so far. 4 years of undergrad and 3 years of med school. He turned to address the remaining guests, his voice carrying across the patio. Doctor, Sterling came to our orphanage every Saturday for 15 years. Read to us, helped with homework, told us we could become anyone. A guest spoke up. What foundation? 3 other servers stepped forward. I hadn't realized they were also my children. A woman, maybe 28, spoke. Dr. Sterling paid for my nursing degree. $95,000. I was at Riverside too. A man around 30. My sister needed heart surgery when I was 17. We had no insurance, no family. Dr. Sterling paid $180,000. Saved her life. Another woman, 26. He donated $2 million for Riverside's new building in 2019. Anonymous donation. But we found out. Julian's voice cracked. What are you people talking about? What foundation? A guest pulled up something on their phone. Margaret Sterling Foundation for Orphans. They showed the screen around. I saw my photo on the board of directors page. The guest continued reading. Established 2005. Current endowment, $52 million. Julian's face went white. 52 million. I nodded. Margaret wanted to help children who had no one. After she died, I put everything into it. Everything you told me you couldn't afford to retire, that you lived on a tight budget. Enabasbord Silwik Da. I never said I couldn't afford to retire. I said I lived simply. There's a difference. You had millions while you struggled, I interrupted. You live in a $4 million house. You drive a $90,000 car. You're not struggling. You're just greedy. David spoke up. Dr. Sterling donates 80% of his income to the foundation. Has done for 20 years. Julian turned on me, his voice rising. Dad, you could have helped me. Given me some of that money. Before I could respond, David stepped between us, his voice sharp with indignation. Helped you! You're his son. You had everything. We had nothing. We needed him. He's my father. He's father to 43 of us, the woman in scrubs said. 43 orphans he put through college. Now we're doctors, nurses, teachers, engineers. Because he gave us what you threw away, attention, belief, support. Julian had no answer for that. The silent stretch broken only by the sound of caterers packing up equipment, the distant crash of waves, the wind moving through the trees. The Edison bulbs had finally started to dim, their batteries dying, and I thought it was fitting. Even the lights were abandoning this party. David stepped closer and hugged me. A real hug, tight and genuine, the kind that says, "You matter." "Thank you for everything. I wouldn't be here without you." I hugged him back, this young man, who was essentially a stranger, and felt Julian's stare burning into us. "I'm proud of you," I told David. When was the last time I'd said those words to Julian? When was the last time Julian had wanted to hear them? David stepped back, wiping his eyes. "Your son doesn't know how lucky he is. He did once. Past tense, I suppose." The 4 former orphans left together, waving goodbye, and I watched them go. My success is my legacy, walking away from Julian's failure. A guest said softly, "That's beautiful, what you've done." I shook my head. That's what Margaret wanted. Julian approached, and his voice broke on every word. "You were never there for me, always at the hospital, always with patients, with strangers' kids instead of your own." I turned to face him, and maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was clarity, but I finally said what needed saying. "You're right, I wasn't there for you enough. I missed things, important things, soccer games and science fairs and parent-teacher conferences. I worked too much, I know that." He looked surprised that I'd admitted it. "But you know what I never did? I never stopped loving you. I never hid you. I never pretended you didn't exist. I never made you wear a servant's uniform at your own son's party." The distinction landed like a physical blow. I put those kids through college because they had no one. You had everything. A father who loved you, a house, food, safety, education, everything they dreamed of having. And it was never enough. Not the house, not the money, not the surgery that saved your life, not the company I funded. Nothing I gave you was ever enough. Julian's voice was desperate now. "Because you never..." Enough. I was tired, bone deep tired. "I'm done explaining myself to you. I'm done hoping you'll understand." I gestured toward where the 4 former orphans had stood. Those kids treasure what they received. They built lives. They give back. They remember. I looked at Julian. "You resent what you have. You built nothing that was truly yours, and you remember only grievances. That's the difference between gratitude and entitlement." Julian opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. No words came out. What could he say? That he deserved more than orphans? That I should have hoarded money instead of helping children? That his resentment was more valid than their gratitude? Any argument he might have made died on his lips. The last few guests were leaving now, offering me quiet words as they passed. "Take care of yourself, Dr. Sterling. You're a good man. That foundation is remarkable." To Julian they said nothing. We stood there in the ruins of his party, champagne glasses scattered across tables, wilted flowers, the catering setup half disassembled. His celebration had become a wake for the relationship we'd never quite had. "I should go," I said finally. "To what?" "Your tiny apartment. Your simple life." His voice dripped with something that might have been contempt or might have been envy. "While $52 million sits in a foundation, yes, because that money isn't mine. It's Margaret's legacy. It's those kids' futures. It was never about me, and it was never about you." I walked toward my car, the old Honda that Julian had always been embarrassed by, that I'd kept running for 15 years because it worked, and I didn't need anything flashy. Behind me, Julian stood alone under the dying Edison bulbs, and I saw something on his face I'd never seen before, the realization that maybe he was the villain in this story, not me. As the orphan's car disappeared down the driveway, I heard heels clicking on stone. Isabella Vanderbilt had come back, without her parents, and she looked angry. She walked straight to me across the patio, past the abandoned champagne glasses and wilted centerpieces. Her expression set with the kind of determination I'd seen on surgeons about to deliver bad news. "Dr. Sterling, I need to talk to you, privately." "I think privacy died about 2 hours ago," I said. "Speak freely." She glanced at the remaining guests, maybe 15 people now, the truly dedicated drama observers. "All right, I need to be transparent." She took a breath. "I suspected something was wrong before tonight." Julian appeared in the doorway listening. Isabella saw him, but didn't care. "This world is small, Julian. People talk." She turned back to me. I'd heard whispers. "Julian Sterling's father is some famous doctor he never mentions. Wonder why he never brings his father around." I nodded. "So you came to find answers." "I came hoping I was wrong, that maybe you'd be here honored, celebrated." She looked at Julian. When you said your father was traveling, Julian, I knew something was off. Julian's voice was defensive. You set me up. This whole night was a trap. No, I didn't know you'd dress him like staff. That was your choice. I was genuinely shocked by that. Isabella pulled out her phone and I saw she'd come prepared. Dr. Sterling, there's something else you should know. She showed me a screenshot. Social media post from last year, photo of Julian and Clarissa at some gala. The caption, Julian Sterling says his parents passed away years ago. A true self-made success story. My chest tightened. Passed away, not estranged. Dead. Another screenshot. Julian at a business conference being interviewed. The quote read, I built this company from nothing with no family support. My parents are deceased. Deceased. He told people I was dead. I looked at Julian. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Julian. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Dad, I didn't mean... You told people I was dead. I said you weren't with us anymore. People assumed Sauds. Isabella interrupted. No, right here. She showed another screenshot. A direct quote, both parents deceased. Father died in 2018. 5 years ago. When I was very much alive. When I'd called to wish him happy birthday and he hadn't answered. Why, I asked. Julian's voice rose, desperate. Because it was easier than explaining why we don't talk. Easier than having people ask questions. So you killed me off, verbally, socially, just to erase me. The sound of wheels on stone made us all turn. Clarissa appeared with 2 rolling suitcases. I called an Uber. I'm going to my sister's. She looked at Isabella. Did you know about all of this? Isabella shook her head. I suspected something was off. Not this. Clarissa turned to Julian, and her voice was thick with anger, and something that might have been grief. I Googled Dr. Arthur Sterling, New York, so many times over the years. You know what I found. Hundreds of results, but you told me he practiced in Florida. Then you said Oregon. I searched the wrong states, because you lied about where he lived. She looked at me, and I saw real pain in her face. You showed me an obituary of a different Arthur Sterling and said, this is my dad. I hadn't known this. The depth of the deception kept unfolding layer after layer, like peeling back infected tissue during surgery, to find the damage went deeper than anyone thought. I would have loved to have a father-in-law, Clarissa said, her voice breaking. My father abandoned me when I was 12. I grew up wondering what it would be like to have a dad who stayed. She looked at Julian with something close to hatred. And you hid yours. A good man. A hero. Someone who would have welcomed me. She turned to me. I'm sorry. I should have tried harder to verify, but I trusted him. He's very good at lying, I said quietly. An Uber pulled up at the end of the driveway. Clarissa started walking toward it, pulling her suitcases behind her. Julian moved to stop her. Clarissa, please. She held up one hand without turning around. My lawyer will contact you Monday. Don't come to my sister's. Don't call me. We're done. The car door closed. The Uber drove away. The last guests were slipping away during this exchange, embarrassed or uncomfortable, or simply done with the spectacle. Now, it was just me, Julian, Isabella, and Robert. Isabella spoke quietly. Dr. Sterling, I serve on the board of the Margaret Sterling Foundation. Did you know that? I nodded. I recognized your name when you introduced yourself. I should have connected the dots sooner. I should have protected you from this. You did protect me by telling the truth. Julian's voice cracked. Everyone's acting like I'm some kind of monster. Robert, who had been silent through most of this, finally spoke. You told people your father was dead. While he was alive? While he was donating millions to help children? What do you call that? Julian had no answer. Isabella and Robert walked toward the driveway together, talking quietly about the foundation's work, about my career. About everything except the man standing 15 feet away who happened to be my son. Their voices faded into the night, and then it was just Julian and me, alone together for the first time all evening. The patio was destroyed, tables askew, chairs, overturned champagne glasses scattered like fallen soldiers. The Edison bulbs had finally died completely, leaving only the house lights spilling through the French doors. The ocean was loud tonight, waves crashing with more force than usual. Or maybe I was just noticing them now, in the absence of music and conversation. Julian stood in the center of the wreckage he'd created, still in his expensive tuxedo, his toupee slightly askew from running his hands through it. He looked small somehow, despite being taller than me, diminished. I didn't know what else to do, he said finally. You could have told the truth. The truth was humiliating. And this isn't... He flinched. I walked to the edge of the patio, looked out at the dark ocean. When your mother died, you were 3 months old. I held you at her funeral. You cried through the whole service. Julian said nothing. I used to wonder what she'd think of you, of the man you became. Tonight I'm glad she's not here to see this. Dad, I'm not done. My voice was calm, surgical. You told the world I was dead, so you could be a self-made man, because neurosurgeon's son didn't fit your story. Because acknowledging me meant acknowledging help, acknowledging debt, acknowledging that you weren't entirely self-created. I turned to face him. The irony is, Julian, I would have stayed dead for you. Socially, I mean. If you'd asked, if you'd said, Dad, I need to build this on my own, please stay in the background. I would have done it. You would, of course, because I loved you, because I wanted you to succeed. Past tense. The word hung between us. But you didn't ask, you just erased me. And that's the difference between humility and shame, between privacy and betrayal. Julian opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came. We stood there in my house at his destroyed party, surrounded by the wreckage of his lies. He looked at me. I looked back. And I realized I had nothing left to say to him. Nothing at all. The orchestra had stopped hours ago. The lights still glowed, but they illuminated an empty party. Julian poured himself a scotch from the bar. I stood by the railing looking out at the ocean, and neither of us spoke for a long time. The waves were loud tonight, crashing against the shore with a rhythm that felt almost angry. Party debris surrounded us, overturned chairs, abandoned champagne glasses, wilted flowers, napkins scattered across tables like fallen snow. The wreckage of what was supposed to be a celebration. I broke the silence first. When did you stop loving me? Julian drank. Oh, I never stopped. Please don't lie anymore. Not now. Not when it's just us. A long pause. He refilled his glass. I don't know, gradually, over years. Why? He laughed bitter and sharp. You really don't know. Tell me. You were never there. Every birthday, every game, every important moment you were at the hospital, saving strangers. I nodded. I was building a career, providing for you. You were choosing them over me, every single time. Is that what you think? That's what I know. I sat down in a patio chair. My legs felt suddenly tired, the exhaustion of the entire night catching up with me all at once. You're right. I wasn't there for you enough. I missed things. Your baseball games, your school plays. But Julian, I was saving people. People who would die if I didn't show up. And I was your son who needed a father. Fair argument. I had no rebuttal for that. Julian sat across from me, and for the first time all night his mask dropped. Not the defensive anger, not the justifications, just raw pain. Do you know what it's like being Dr. Arthur Sterling's son? Sixth, Tell me. Everyone expects you to be brilliant, to follow in your footsteps, to become you. I tried medical school, failed organic chemistry. I remembered. You called me crying. I told you it was okay, that not everyone is meant to be a doctor. You said it with relief in your voice. That's not true. It was. I heard it. You were relieved you didn't have to compete with a mediocre version of yourself. Hey, Julian. So I went into business, made my own path, and you still overshadowed me. Every conversation people ask, oh, you're Dr. Sterling's son? Is he mentoring you? Are you carrying on his legacy? I'm 45 years old and I'm still just your son. No identity of my own. I thought about this. Maybe there was truth here. Maybe I'd never considered how heavy my reputation might weigh on him. So you erased me to escape my shadow. I needed to be someone, not just an appendage of you. You could be both, my son and yourself. How in every room I walk into, everyone knows your name. By becoming someone worth knowing for your own achievements. I tried. I built a company, made money, and you sabotaged it. I didn't sabotage anything. I just stopped letting you steal from me. Wrong thing to say. His face hardened, the vulnerability disappearing behind walls of anger. You want the truth? Julian stood. You're cold. You always have been. Margaret understood you. I never did. You value strangers over family, orphans over your own blood. You gave millions to kids you barely knew. Couldn't give me patience, time, forgiveness. Every word landed. Some were true, some weren't. I couldn't always tell which was which anymore. I gave you 42 years of patience, I said quietly. Tonight is when it ran out. Julian's laugh was harsh. Because I made you work at a party that's dramatic. No, because you told people I was dead. Because you built a company on my work without asking. Because when given a choice between honesty and convenience, you always chose convenient lies. I should have done better as a father. I admit that. But you should have done better as a son. And you won't admit that. Julian drained his glass. So what now? You disown me? Cut me off? Or I don't know yet. That's cruel. That's honesty. First time I've been completely honest with you in years. He walked toward the house. I can't do this. Running doesn't change what happened. He stopped at the door, didn't turn around. I'm sorry you're disappointed in me. I've been disappointed in you my whole life. The door closed. I sat alone on the patio, and I cried for the first time all night. Not because of what had happened, but because of what had never existed. I'd thought we had a relationship that was damaged. I was wrong. We'd never had one to begin with. Just two people living parallel lives, connected by DNA and obligation, but never by understanding. Never by the kind of love that sees and accepts and forgives. Margaret had bridged that gap when she was alive. She'd translated between us, softened my edges, explained me to him in ways he could understand. When she died, that bridge collapsed, and we'd never rebuilt it. I'd thought time would heal it. Instead, time had just let the distance grow until we were strangers shouting across a chasm too wide to cross. The ocean kept crashing, the lights kept glowing, the party debris shifted in the breeze. I thought about the 43 orphans I'd helped raise, kids I'd read to encourage put through school. They'd hug me tonight, thanked me, told me I'd changed their lives. My own son couldn't stand to look at me. What did that say about me as a father? What did it say about him as a son? Maybe both things were true. I'd failed him, and he'd failed me. Maybe there was no villain in this story, just two flawed people who'd never learned how to love each other right. Or maybe that was the easy answer, the comfortable one, the one that let me off the hook. I heard a car pulling up. Strange. It was nearly 10 o'clock. Who would be arriving now? I wiped my eyes and walked toward the driveway. A Honda Civic, Virginia plates. And stepping out of it, Dr. Patricia, head of the hospital ethics committee. She looked very serious, and she was carrying a thick file with my son's name on it. The justice is about to be served, but the price is greater than anyone could imagine. Before I reveal the confidential files that will officially send Julian to jail and put an end to this father-son relationship, please leave the number 127 number of victims in the comments, so I know you're still following closely. A small note. This story incorporates fictional elements to convey a deeper message. If you don't want to continue hearing these harsh truths, please choose other content that suits you better. Patricia doesn't make house calls, and she doesn't work at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, unless someone's dying, or someone died. She walked up the driveway with the careful precision of someone carrying evidence her expression, the kind doctors wear when delivering the worst possible news. Arthur, I'm sorry to come so late. It's Patricia. What's wrong? Marcus called me, told me what happened tonight, the party, the truths that came out. She paused at the patio steps. He said you didn't know anything about your son's business operations. I'm still learning. There's more. Something I've been investigating for 3 months. I was going to present it to the hospital board next week. She looked at me, and I saw something in her face that made my chest tighten. But after tonight, after learning how Julian treated you, I realized you need to know now. Ethan's Tesla pulled up behind her Civic. He got out looking haggard. His tie loosened his face, drawn. Mom, I said I'd handle... You've been handling it for months, Marcus. It's time for the truth. Julian stepped outside, drawn by voices. What's going on, Marcus? Patricia turned to him. Julian, good. You should hear this too. She opened the file, handed me documents. Arthur, did you know your son owns 8 medical clinics? NDBGs is I read the first page, a marketing flyer. Quality healthcare using Dr. Arthur Sterling's proven methods. My photo, taken from the hospital website. My credentials listed. My specialties. My reputation? I looked up. I never authorized this. We know, it's identity theft. Patricia's voice was clinical professional. But that's not the worst part. She showed me employee records. The clinics hire doctors who've failed their U.S. medical licensing exams. Some have foreign medical degrees, but can't pass certification. Some aren't doctors at all. Julian's voice was defensive. That's not true. We hired qualified... Ethan cut him off. Julian, stop. Just stop. He turned to me, and I saw genuine anguish in his face. I'm the VP of robotics. I didn't know about the clinic operations until 3 months ago. They're a separate entity under the Sterling Medical Solutions umbrella. When I found out, I tried to shut them down. Julian threatened to fire me. Patricia continued relentless. The clinics target vulnerable populations, undocumented immigrants, uninsured workers, people afraid to go to real hospitals. They prescribe unnecessary procedures, unnecessary tests, surgeries for conditions that don't exist, all to maximize insurance fraud and cash payments. I felt sick. How long? 3 years. Julian tried again. They're providing affordable health care to people who need it. They're exploiting desperate people, Patricia said, using your father's name and reputation to build trust. She paused. And Arthur, there's one more thing. She pulled out another file, this one thicker. 6 months ago, Maria Rodriguez, 34 years old, mother of 3 children. She showed me a photo, a woman smiling with her kids, young, vibrant, alive. She came to the Bronx clinic with chest pain, shortness of breath. I knew those symptoms. Classic heart attack presentation. The doctor, a man who'd failed his licensing exam, twice diagnosed anxiety, prescribed Xanax, sent her home. My hands started shaking. She died that night, heart attack. Her 11-year-old son found her in the kitchen. I couldn't breathe. The ocean was too loud. The patio lights too bright. Everything felt wrong, tilted like the world had shifted on its axis. Patricia's voice was gentle but unrelenting. The medical examiner said any competent doctor would have caught it. A basic EKG would have shown the problem. But Julian's clinics don't have EKG machines. Too expensive. Maria paid $300 cash for that visit. She died 12 hours later. I looked at Julian. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Tell me this isn't true. Silence. Julian. Marcus spoke quietly. It's true. Julian paid the family $200,000 to sign an NDA, to not report it to authorities. Patricia added, I serve on the hospital ethics committee. We received an anonymous tip last month. I've been building a case. She looked at Julian with something close to contempt. Tonight, after learning what you did to your father, I realized you're capable of anything. Julian finally spoke. That was one incident, one unfortunate... I stood up, stepped toward him. He backed away. Don't you dare call her unfortunate. Her name was Maria Rodriguez. She had 3 children. She worked 2 jobs. My voice was shaking now, barely controlled. She trusted a clinic with Dad's name, with Dad's face on the wall. And she died because you hired fake doctors to maximize profit. Julian's voice rose desperate. I was trying to help people who couldn't afford... I slapped him. The sound cracked across the patio like a gunshot. First time I'd ever hit my son. First time I'd ever raised a hand to him in 45 years. He stood there stunned, hand moving to his cheek. I'd pulled the punch surgeon's hand's perfect control, but the impact was still there. Not physical. Something deeper. $300, I said quietly. She scraped together $300 because she trusted my name, my reputation, everything I built in 40 years. And you used it to sell her a death sentence. Patricia was pulling out more files, medical records, complaint forms, legal documents. There are 8 other complaints, patients who were harmed, families who were paid off to stay quiet. I looked at the files, looked at my son. How many? We don't know yet, Patricia said. These are just the ones who came forward. How many were too scared, too ashamed? How many died quietly? Julian found his voice. You don't understand the business realities. Business realities. I stepped closer. He stepped back. You put my name on clinics staffed by people who failed their medical exams. You targeted the most vulnerable people in society. You let a mother of 3 die because an EKG machine was too expensive. And when she died, you paid hush money, not to save your company, not even to save yourself, to keep using my name, my reputation, my life's work. To keep the scam running. Ethan was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. Dr. Sterling, I swear I didn't know. When I found out, I went to the board. Julian convinced them it was all legitimate, that I was overreacting, that the regulatory compliance was handled. I should have gone to authorities immediately. I should have... His voice broke. That woman died. Others were hurt. And I was worried about my career, about being fired. Patricia put a hand on her son's shoulder. You came to me. You're cooperating now. That matters. She turned to Julian. The hospital board will receive my full report Monday morning. I'll be recommending we file complaints with the State Medical Board, the Department of Health, the Insurance Fraud Division, and the District Attorney. Every clinic will be shut down, every fake doctor investigated, every patient case reviewed. Julian's face was pale. You can't. I already have. The investigation started 3 weeks ago. Tonight just accelerated the timeline. The weight of it hit me. Maria Rodriguez, 34 years old, mother of 3. Dead because my son put profit over people. Dead because he stole my name to build trust he then betrayed. How many others? How many people walked into those clinics because they saw my photo? Because they'd heard of me? Because they thought Dr. Arthur Sterling's proven methods meant they'd be safe? I'd spent 40 years building a reputation for excellence, for integrity, for putting patients first, always. And my son had weaponized it, turned it into a tool for exploitation. Julian touched his face where I'd slapped him. The mark was already fading. I'd controlled the force, couldn't help it. Surgeon's instinct, but something else was marked. Something that couldn't be seen, but could be felt in the space between us. Whatever had been left of our relationship, whatever fragile thread still connected father and son. It was gone now. Patricia was spreading more files across the patio table. Patient names, clinic locations, financial records showing the cash flow, the insurance fraud, the systematic exploitation. 8 clinics, she said. 47 employees, 3 years of operation, estimated 3,000 patients treated. How many harmed? How many misdiagnosed? How many died? Idofiasil. She looked at Julian. That's what we're going to find out. I looked at the files, at my son, at the evidence of betrayal so profound I couldn't fully process it. This wasn't over, I said quietly. Things are about to get much, much worse. My hand hurt from the slap, but not as much as my chest tightening under the weight of the truth. My son wasn't just ungrateful. He was dangerous. Julian tried to find his footing, his voice taking on that reasonable tone he used with investors. Dad, you don't understand business. Sometimes there are complexities. Complexities. A woman died. That was a tragic accident. Negligence. Preventable negligence that you tried to cover up with hush money. Patricia's voice cut through clinical and precise. Julian, you hired unlicensed practitioners. That's illegal. You committed insurance fraud. That's illegal. You obstructed justice by paying families to stay silent. That's illegal. And you did all of it using your father's name and reputation without permission. Julian tried another approach, his voice softening. Dad, I made mistakes, but I can fix this. Shut down the clinics, make restitution. You can't fix Maria Rodriguez. She's dead. Her children don't have a mother. How many others? Julian Patricia said there were 8 other complaints. Julian said nothing. Ethan stepped forward and I saw he'd been crying. Julian, my mother has documentation of 127 patient complaints over 3 years. 127 people who were harmed or mistreated. I felt like I'd been punched. 127. Julian's voice rose. Most of those are just people unhappy with their care. People who trusted Dad's name, I shouted. First time I'd raised my voice all night. First time in years, maybe. You exploited me, my life's work, my reputation, to harm people who had no other options. That's not just betrayal, that's evil. My phone rang. Richard Cole, my attorney. Arthur, your text said urgent. I'm outside. Come in. Richard entered with his briefcase, silver-haired and professional, in a suit he'd probably thrown on after my call. I brought the documents you requested last week. The estate changes. Yes, I want to execute them, tonight. Julian's head snapped up. What documents? Richard pulled out papers. Your father is revoking all previous wills and trusts. The entire estate, including real property investments, patents, and liquid assets, will transfer to the Margaret Sterling Foundation upon his death. Julian went pale. No, you can't. What about Sophie? I asked Richard. Your granddaughter has a separate trust, as you requested. $2 million managed by the Vanderbilt Foundation. She'll receive it at age 25. I looked at Julian. Sophie will be fine. More than fine. She'll be free of your influence. You can't do this. I can, and I am. Richard laid the documents on the desk. I read each page carefully, signed each one. My hand was steady. Surgeon's control. Patricia and Marcus witnessed the signatures. Effective immediately, Richard said. Julian's voice cracked. So I get nothing. You have your company. Oh, wait, it's bankrupt. You have your house. Oh, wait, it's mine. You have your wife. Oh wait, she left. You have exactly what you deserve, Julian. Nothing. I'm your son. Was past tense. I pulled out my phone. There's one more thing. I dialed 911. Julian lunged forward. Dad, don't... Marcus stepped between us, blocking him. Yes, I need to report medical fraud and negligent homicide. My name is Dr. Arthur Sterling. I'm calling to report illegal medical clinics operating under my name without authorization. I gave the address as the details. A patient died 6 months ago, Maria Rodriguez. The family was paid to stay silent. Julian's voice was desperate now. You're ruining me. No, I'm protecting future Maria Rodriguez's. I hung up. Julian stared at me. You called the police on your own son. I called the police on a criminal who happens to share DNA with me. Patricia handed me her complete file. Everything's documented here. Patient complaints, employment records, the Rodriguez case, the NDAs. I'll testify if needed. So will I, Marcus said quietly. 15 minutes later, Detective Sarah Reyes arrived, young, sharp-eyed, taking notes before she even got out of her car. I handed her the file. Dr. Sterling, I'm here about your report. This is everything. 8 clinics, 127 complaints, 1 death that I know of, possibly more. She reviewed it, her expression darkening. Julian Sterling, I need you to come to the station for questioning. Julian straightened his shoulders, found some vestige of dignity. I'm not going anywhere without my attorney. That's your right, but we will be investigating. The clinics will be shut down immediately pending review. If we find evidence of negligent homicide, charges will be filed. She looked at me. You understand this is your son. I understand he used my name to harm vulnerable people. I understand a woman died because he hired fake doctors to maximize profit. I understand he paid $200,000 to cover it up. Yes, detective, I understand exactly what he is. She nodded and left, with Patricia and Marcus to coordinate the investigation. Julian and I were alone again. You had every advantage, I said quietly. Love, health, education, opportunity. You could have been anything. You chose to become this. I can't fix you. I can't forgive this. All I can do is make sure you don't hurt anyone else. Goodbye, Julian. Old age, I'm not your father anymore. I'm just the man who used to be your father. I walked toward the door. You'll regret this, Julian said. I stopped, turned back. No, I'll regret I had to do this, but I'll never regret doing it. That's the difference between us. I left him standing in the study, my house, my name that he'd tried to steal. Got in my car and drove. In the rearview mirror, I saw the house blazing with lights, the empty party, the solitary sun. I didn't look back again. The drive to Brooklyn took 40 minutes. Traffic was light, the city quieter than usual for a Friday night. Or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. My mind was replaying the night in fragments, the server's uniform. Sophie crying at the window, David Martinez hugging me, Maria Rodriguez's photo, the sound of my hand hitting Julian's face. The apartment was dark when I arrived. Small, 1 bedroom, books everywhere, medical journals stacked on the coffee table, a photo of Margaret on the mantle, the only decoration I'd bothered with. This was my real home, not the Hamptons mansion. This rent-controlled Brooklyn walk-up I'd had for 30 years. The place I'd come home to after surgeries, after rounds, after visiting the orphanage. Julian had never been here. Not once in 30 years. Never asked about it. Never wanted to see where I lived when I wasn't serving him. I'd kept this place separate, my sanctuary. And now I understood why. Some part of me had always known I'd need somewhere he couldn't touch. Couldn't contaminate with his lies. My phone buzzed. Julian's number. I turned it off. Some conversations end before they begin. I'd come back from my belongings from the mansion later. Clothes, some books. The photo of Margaret I kept in the bedroom. But tonight I just needed distance. From the lies, from the party, from the son I'd lost years ago, but only truly buried tonight. I sat in the dark apartment still in my server's uniform and felt nothing. Not grief, not satisfaction, just a strange hollow peace. I'd done what needed doing, signed what needed signing, called who needed calling. Tomorrow there would be consequences, investigations, legal proceedings, media coverage probably. The medical community would be horrified. My reputation would be examined, dissected, defended. Questioned. Let them question. I knew the truth. I'd spent 40 years building something worth building, and when my son tried to weaponize it, I'd stopped him. That was enough. I changed out of the uniform, folded it carefully, left it on the chair. Tomorrow I'd return it to the catering company. Tonight, I just wanted to forget it existed. In the morning, I'd call the foundation, tell them about the new will, make sure everything was in order. But tonight, I was just a 70-year-old man who'd finally learned the hardest lesson: you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Even when that someone is your son, especially when that someone is your son. I woke to sunlight streaming through the Brooklyn apartment windows and 47 missed calls. For a moment, I'd forgotten. Then I remembered last night I'd dismantled my son's life. And somehow, I'd slept better than I had in years. The apartment was quiet, peaceful, just the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic sounds from the street below. I made coffee, real coffee, not the expensive espresso machine Julian had in the mansion, and stood by the window watching Manhattan wake up across the river. This was my real home, not the Hamptons estate. This 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights with secondhand furniture and medical journals stacked on every surface. Margaret's photo on the mantle. Sophie's crayon drawings held to the refrigerator with magnets shaped like stethoscopes. I'd lived here for 20 years, paid rent every month, never missed a payment. This was where I came after surgeries after visiting the orphanage. After those increasingly uncomfortable dinners at Julian's house, where I felt more like an intruder than family. The mansion had always been Julian's. I'd just paid for it. I turned on my phone. The notifications exploded. 47 missed calls, 23 voicemails, 67 text messages. Most from Julian. I ignored those. One from Maximilian. Arthur, call me when you're ready. The offer still stands. One from Patricia. Clinics were shut down this morning. Investigation underway. One from Ethan. I'm sorry for my part in this. Board meeting Monday. Julian's been removed. And one from Sophie. Grandpa, are you okay? I'm scared. That one broke my heart. I called her immediately. She answered on the first ring, crying. Grandpa, I'm here, sweetheart. Why did you leave Mom and Dad fought all night? I heard everything. I know, I'm sorry you had to hear that. Is it true you saved Dad's life? Yes, a long time ago. Then why is he mad at you? How do you explain this to an 8-year-old? How do you tell a child that sometimes adults make mistakes so big they change everything? That sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are so big they change things. Did Dad make a big mistake? Yes. Are you going to forgive him? Silence. I didn't know how to answer that. Grandpa, I don't know yet, Sophie. Some mistakes take time to forgive. Some can never be forgiven. Mom says she's divorcing Dad. I know. Is it my fault? No, absolutely not. Nothing about this is your fault. My voice was fierce, protective. You're my sunshine. Remember, nothing about you could ever be wrong. But everything's changing. I know, and I'm sorry. Will I still see you? Every weekend, we'll make pancakes, go to the park. Nothing changes between you and me. You promise? I promise. You're my granddaughter. Nothing your father did can change that. Julian's voice in the background. Sophie, hang up. The call ended abruptly. I sat there holding the phone, tears running down my face. She was only 8 years old. She shouldn't be caught in the middle of this. I turned on the TV, local news. Breaking news: medical fraud investigation, launched targeting chain of discount clinics. Sterling Medical Solutions under scrutiny following allegations of negligent homicide. Footage of the clinics, locked doors, signs reading, closed by order of Department of Health. A reporter standing outside the Bronx location. The clinics are accused of using the name and likeness of renowned neurosurgeon Dr. Arthur Sterling without authorization. They showed my photo, the one from the hospital website. Dr. Sterling reportedly self-reported the fraud, bringing to light his own son's operation. My phone rang. The hospital administrator. Arthur, the board needs a statement. Media's calling. I'll be there Monday. I'll give a full statement then. Were you involved? No, I had no knowledge until last night. We know. Your integrity is beyond question. But Arthur, your son. This is going to be painful. It already is. A text from Ethan, company board fired Julian this morning. For cause, I'm interim CEO, trying to save the robotics division, shutting down everything else. I replied, do the right thing. Ethan, I will, because you showed me what that looks like. The news continued. Patients from all 8 clinic locations are being contacted. Free medical screenings being offered. The Rodriguez family has filed a wrongful death lawsuit. A photo of Maria Rodriguez with her 3 children, smiling, alive. I stared at that photo. This was why I'd done it. not revenge, not anger, to protect people like her. Too late for her, but not too late for others. The reporter again. Dr. Sterling, age 70, has been with Memorial Hospital for over 40 years. Colleagues describe him as a man of exceptional integrity who's devoted his life to saving others. The irony that his own son allegedly exploited that reputation is not lost on the medical community. My phone vibrated. Another text. Unknown number. Dr. Sterling, this is Carmen Rodriguez, Maria's oldest daughter. Detective Reyes gave me your number. We want to meet you, if you're willing. I stared at the message for a long time. How do you face the children of someone your son killed? How do you look into eyes that will forever carry the grief your family caused? How do you apologize for something you didn't do, but should have prevented? The coffee had gone cold. The sun was higher now, streaming through the window, illuminating dust motes in the air. Outside, Brooklyn was going about its Saturday morning. People walking dogs, couples getting brunch, families in the park. Normal life, as if the world hadn't shifted on its axis last night. But it had, for Julian, for those clinic patients, for the Rodriguez family, for Sophie, for me. I picked up my phone, typed carefully, yes, when and where, because running from responsibility isn't who I am. Even when that responsibility wears my son's face. Even when facing it means looking at the consequences of choices I didn't make but couldn't prevent. The response came quickly. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. There's a cafe near Memorial Hospital. Maria used to work nearby. I'll be there. I set the phone down and went to take a shower. Let the hot water run over me, washing away the previous night. The server's uniform was still folded on the chair where I'd left it. I'd return it to the catering company, eventually. Today I just needed to be still, to sit in my apartment with my coffee and my books and Margaret's photo and Sophie's drawings, to remember who I was before last night, to figure out who I'd be moving forward. The TV was still running. Another news segment. Sterling Medical Solutions stock has been suspended from trading pending investigation. Employees report being told to prepare for potential bankruptcy. My phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, but it was the foundation. Dr. Sterling. It's Jennifer from Margaret Sterling Foundation. We saw the news. The board wants you to know we stand behind you completely. Thank you. And Dr. Sterling donations have increased 30% since the news broke. People want to support the real work you've been doing. After she hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment and let that sink in. 40 years of building a reputation. One night of it being weaponized, and somehow in the wreckage people saw the truth. Not Julian's lies, my life's work. Tomorrow I'd meet Carmen Rodriguez. Monday I'd face the hospital board. Eventually I'd have to deal with Julian with lawyers, with the full legal consequences of what he'd done. But today, I was just going to sit in my apartment, drink my coffee, look at Sophie's drawings, and remember that somewhere in this mess, I'd done the right thing. Even if it hurt, especially because it hurt. The Rodriguez family lived in a third-floor walk-up in Queens. As I climbed those stairs on Monday evening, every step felt heavier than the last. It wasn't the physical exertion. It was the crushing weight of knowing I was about to face 3 children whose mother was dead because someone had weaponized my name. The hallway smelled of floor wax and simmering garlic. Sounds of distant televisions filtering through thin wooden doors. I stopped in front of apartment 3C. My hand hovered over the door, trembling. I had performed 4,000 surgeries, held beating hearts in my palms, and faced the most grim prognoses with a steady gaze. But this felt like walking into a trial where I was both the witness and the evidence of the crime. I knocked. Footsteps approached, light hesitant. The door creaked open. A 14-year-old girl with dark, haunting eyes stared up at me. She had Maria's face, the same high cheekbones I'd seen in the crime scene photos, the same strength in her jaw. "You're Dr. Sterling," she said, her voice steady despite the redness around her eyes. "The real one." "Yes." I managed my throat dry. "And you must be Carmen. Come in." The apartment was small but meticulously kept. A mismatched sofa sat against a wall covered in framed photos of a woman laughing Maria at a picnic. Maria holding a newborn, Maria dancing. In the corner, a small altar had been erected. A portrait of Maria, surrounded by flickering white candles, fresh carnations, and a worn set of rosary beads. An older woman, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, stepped out of the tiny kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral apron. This was Rosa Maria's mother. "Dr. Sterling." She said, her voice raspy with grief, but devoid of the malice I expected. "Please sit. I am so deeply sorry." I began, my voice cracking before I could even settle into the wooden chair. I didn't know about the clinics. I didn't know what Julian was doing. But it was my name on that sign, and I should have. Rosa held up a hand, a quiet, commanding gesture. "Sit first. Then we talk." I sat. 2 younger children watched me from the shadows of a hallway. Miguel, 11, glared at me with a raw, burning anger that felt like a physical heat. Little Isabella, 7, clung to a tattered stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide and confused. This was the family my son had dismantled for the sake of a profit margin. Miguel spoke first, his voice sharp. "Did you know your son was a liar?" "No," I said softly, meeting his gaze. "I didn't talk to my son much. We weren't close." "Why?" "Because I made mistakes as a father, Miguel. I wasn't there enough when he was young. He grew up angry at me, and he turned that anger into something. Selfish. But you're a good doctor. You save people." "I try. I've been a surgeon for 40 years. Carmen leaned forward, her eyes searching mine. "Could you have saved our mom?" The question felt like a scalpel to the chest. Yes. The symptoms she had, the chest pain, the shortness of breath, any competent doctor would have run an EKG. It would have shown the blockage immediately. A simple procedure could have fixed it. "She should be here, Carmen." Little Isabella crept closer, her voice a tiny whisper. "Why didn't Mommy go to your hospital?" "Because my hospital is very expensive, sweetheart. And your mom was trying to take care of you with the money she had. She went to that clinic because she saw my name. She thought it would be safe." I looked at Rosa, my vision blurring. "And I am truly, truly sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring her back," Miguel snapped. "Miguel," Rosa warned gently. "No, he's right," I said. "Sorry fixes nothing, but I want to do something. Not for Julian and not for the courts. For you." I pulled out a thick envelope. "I've established a trust fund for the 3 of you. It's through the Margaret Sterling Foundation. It's for your education, your health care, your housing. $500,000 divided equally." Rosa gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "We don't want hush money. This isn't his money," I said firmly. "This is mine, my life savings. My wife Margaret passed away 10 years ago. She spent her life wanting to help children who lost their parents. I think she would want me to help you." Rosa looked at the altar, then back at me. "Dr. Sterling, you are not your son. That you came here. You climbed those stairs. You looked these children in the eye. That takes a kind of courage he doesn't have." She reached out her hand, calloused and warm, and touched my arm. "We accept your help, not because we want the money, but because Maria would want her children to have a future." Then she said the words I didn't think I deserved to hear. "And Dr. Sterling, I forgive you." The sob escaped before I could catch it. "You have nothing to forgive me for." "I forgive you for carrying a burden of guilt that isn't yours," she whispered. "I forgive you for the sins of your son, because someone needs to tell you this is not your fault." Suddenly, little Isabella climbed onto my lap. It was so unexpected I nearly fell back. She didn't say anything at first, just leaned her head against my server jacket-turned-surgeon suit. "You're sad," she said. "Yes, very sad. Me too. I miss my mommy. I miss my wife too." "Honey, did your son make her die?" "No, she was sick, cancer, but I miss her every single day." "Maybe they are friends in heaven now," Isabella said, patting my hand. I wept then openly, in a small apartment in Queens, comforted by a 7-year-old girl whose life had been shattered by my own flesh and blood. As I prepared to leave, Miguel walked me to the door. The anger in his eyes hadn't vanished, but it had softened into a weary curiosity. "Will you come back and see us? Do you want me to?" Carmen answered for him. "We need good examples, doctor, of what a man is supposed to be. Our father left before Isabella was born. Mom raised us alone." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "If you're willing, we'd like to know you." Rosa nodded. "That trust. We are grateful. But we are more grateful for the man who walked through that door tonight." I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of their grace far heavier than the weight of my son's betrayal. These children had lost everything, yet they were the ones offering me a way back to the light. I walked out of the Rodriguez apartment, carrying a drawing Isabella had pressed into my hand. She had drawn her mother as an angel with massive shimmering wings. "For you," she had said, "so you remember the good people." I folded it carefully and tucked it into my wallet right next to the photograph of Margaret. 2 angels, one I couldn't save, one I could have saved. If only my son had possessed a shred of the integrity I saw in this small, crowded home. I drove away from Queens knowing one painful truth. These children had more forgiveness in their grief than Julian had held in his entire life. And that reality was a sharper sting than any betrayal he had ever dealt me. Over the next 3 months, I watched my son's empire crumble in slow motion. It wasn't a view from a distance. I was summoned as a witness. I testified. And every piece of evidence presented in those wood-paneled rooms forced me to confront a devastating truth. I had known Julian was in trouble, but I hadn't known he was a criminal. The transition from Dr. Arthur Sterling medical legend to Arthur Sterling key witness was jarring. My life became a cycle of depositions, grand jury summons, and somber meetings with investigators. The world outside continued its summer heat, but inside the halls of justice the air was perpetually cold. I stood in the hallway of the federal courthouse, my hands tucked into my pockets to hide their tremor. When my name was called, I walked in, raised my right hand, and swore the oath. "I do," I said, the words echoing. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Miller, wasted no time. "Dr. Sterling, when did you first become aware of the clinical operations of Sterling Medical Solutions?" "May 12th, 2023, I replied, "at my son's birthday party." "You had no prior knowledge?" "None. My son and I have been estranged for years. I knew he was in medical tech, but I did not know the specifics of his business model." "And upon learning the truth, what did you do?" "I reported it immediately, to the hospital ethics committee and to the police, even knowing your son would face criminal charges." I paused. I looked at the jurors, ordinary people looking for the truth. "I am a doctor," I said, choosing my words with surgical precision. "I took an oath. Primum non nocere. First, do no harm. My son was harming people. I had a moral and professional obligation to stop him, even if it meant destroying his life, especially because he is my son. He used my name, my reputation, and my life's work to facilitate this deception. That makes me responsible for stopping it." The defense attorney for one of Julian's associates stood up. "Dr. Sterling, are you aware your son told his colleagues and investors that you were deceased?" A heavy silence fell over the room. I became aware of that fact the same night I discovered the clinics. "How did that make you feel, Doctor?" "Objection, relevance," Miller barked. "Your Honor," the defense countered. This goes to the witness's state of mind and the bias in his testimony. Overruled, the witness may answer. I looked directly at the court reporter. How did it make me feel? It made me feel like I had lost my son many years ago. I just hadn't been brave enough to admit it until that moment. Detective Reyes kept me updated, though it was often a grim catalog of failures. Because Julian had stolen my identity to authorize medical protocols, I was technically a victim, but I felt more like an accomplice by negligence. By July, the numbers were staggering. We've identified 127 formal patient complaints, Reyes told me over coffee in a plastic cup. 8 other families were paid off hush money after adverse incidents at the clinics. Your son spent over $800,000 on non-disclosure agreements. In August, the formal indictments were handed down. Julian was charged with conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, unauthorized practice of medicine via intermediaries, bribery, obstruction of justice, and the one that hurt the most, criminally negligent homicide in the death of Maria Rodriguez. "The doctors he hired are flipping," Reyes said. "They're testifying against Julian to get their charges reduced to deportation instead of federal prison. Your son's lawyers are already fishing for a plea deal." "Will he go to prison?" I asked. "Likely not for long," Reyes admitted with a sigh. "First-time offender, white-collar crime, and he's cooperating now that the walls are closing in. High fines, probation, community service. But his career is over. He'll never work in any regulated industry again." "Is that enough?" I wondered aloud. "Justice isn't always about the length of a sentence, Arthur," Reyes said. "We shut down 8 illegal clinics. We protected thousands of future patients. That's the win." Meanwhile, Ethan Whitaker, the only person who seemed to truly care about the technology Julian had built, was busy amputating the gangrenous parts of the company. He managed to save the Neuralink Robotics division, stripping the Sterling name from the building. The new entity was called Neuraltech Innovations. Ethan sent me a text. Julian has been stripped of his shares. The board voted him out. The company is yours if you want a seat, Arthur. I replied, keep it, make it ethical. That is all I ask. On July 1st, Clarissa filed for divorce. It wasn't a sad affair. It was a tactical extraction. Her filing cited fraud, concealment of criminal activity, and the endangerment of their child's future. Her lawyers argued that the prenuptial agreement was void due to Julian's fraudulent misrepresentation of his business at the time of signing. I was called as a character witness for the custody hearing. It was the most painful hour of the entire summer. Dr. Sterling, Clarissa's lawyer asked, in your professional opinion, should Julian have unsupervised access to his daughter, Sophie? I looked at Julian. He looked thinner, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. He looked at me with a mixture of betrayal and fury. My professional opinion as a doctor, or my personal opinion as his father, both. Professionally, I said, my heart feeling like lead. He has shown a profound lack of judgment, a disregard for safety, and a willingness to endanger vulnerable populations for personal gain. Personally, he is my son, and I love him. But love is not the same as trust. Do I trust him alone with Sophie? No, I do not. Clarissa was awarded sole legal and physical custody. Julian was granted supervised visitation every other Sunday. Within weeks, I heard through Sophie that Clarissa was already seeing someone else, a high-powered attorney, someone safe, someone who didn't have a father's ghost or a criminal record hanging over him. By the end of August, Julian moved out of the Hamptons estate. He rented a studio apartment in Queens for $1,200 a month. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was in the same borough, perhaps only a few miles away from the Rodriguez family. I wondered if he ever walked past their building. I wondered if the sight of a mother holding her child's hand on the sidewalk made his skin crawl with guilt. Probably not. By September, the noise began to settle into a dull, aching silence. Julian had officially agreed to plead guilty to reduced charges. Sentencing was set for October. I was listed as a victim of identity theft, though I refused any restitution. I didn't want his money that smelled of Maria Rodriguez's blood and the fear of 100 other patients. I wanted him to understand what he had done. I wanted to see a flicker of the boy I used to hold in my arms, a sign that there was still a soul beneath the ambition. But understanding requires a conscience. And as I watched him walk out of the courtroom, his head held high in a fake show of defiance, I realized that Julian's conscience had died long before his mother did. Or perhaps it had never existed at all. October 12th, 2023. 5 months after that disastrous birthday party, I sat in the very back row of the courtroom, tucked away in the shadows of the gallery, watching my son receive his judgment. For the first time since that night in May, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Not forgiveness, never that, but a cold, hollow pity. Julian didn't see me. Or perhaps he was simply perfecting the art of pretending I didn't exist, a skill he'd used against me for years. He had lost weight, a lot of it. The expensive, tailored suits had been replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting charcoal jacket from a discount warehouse. He looked gray-aged and diminished, standing there with his head bowed beside a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The judge, a man with a voice like gravel grinding on stone, began to read the verdict. Mr. Julian Sterling, you have pleaded guilty to medical fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. These charges were reduced from criminally negligent homicide due to your cooperation with federal authorities. However, the judge paused, his eyes narrowing. Your actions caused immeasurable harm to vulnerable communities. You traded human safety for a balance sheet. The room was silent. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock. I sentence you to 18 months of probation, the judge continued, a fine of $250,000, and 1,000 hours of community service. Furthermore, you are permanently barred from serving on corporate boards or holding any licenses within the medical device industry. Your professional reputation is in ruins, Mr. Sterling. That may well be punishment enough. The judge leaned forward. You will complete your community service hours in a healthcare setting. It is the belief of this court that you should serve the very types of people you exploited. You have 30 days to begin. When asked if he had anything to say to the affected families, Julian cleared his throat. I am sorry for my mistakes. he said, his voice thin. I thought I was providing affordable care. I was wrong. My mistakes, I thought. Even now facing a federal judge, he was hedging. He wasn't owning the malice. He was painting it as a lapse in judgment. I slipped out of the courtroom before the bailiff could dismiss the assembly. I didn't want him to know I had witnessed his final stripping of dignity. By November 1st, the irony of the universe decided to sharpen its blade. The hospital administrator at Memorial called me into his office. Arthur, I need to tell you this before you hear it on the floor. We've hired a new entry-level staff member in hospital services, Julian Marcus Sterling. My stomach tightened into a hard knot. Julian. He applied using his middle name. HR didn't make the connection until this morning. He needs the job to satisfy his probation and the community service requirements. We are a teaching hospital. We frequently take court-ordered placements. The administrator looked at me with genuine concern. If you're uncomfortable, Arthur, we can transfer him to a satellite clinic. No, I interrupted, my voice flat. If he wants to work here, let him. Let him see every day what a real hospital looks like. Let him file the records of successful surgeries and ethical treatments. Let him mop the floors I walk on. Perhaps he'll finally learn the weight of the name he tried to steal. A week later, I was walking through the medical records wing on the basement level. At the far end of the corridor, I saw a man in faded hospital scrubs, pushing a heavy cart of patient files. It was Julian. We stopped 10 yards apart. The air between us felt heavy, charged with all the words we had shouted and all the silences we had kept. His face was a chaotic map of shame, anger, and a desperate lingering resentment. My face remained a mask of stone. Dad! He started, his voice cracking. I didn't stop. I kept walking, my footsteps echoing against the linoleum. Dad, please. He followed me for a few steps, the cart rattling behind him. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. Do not call me that here. What am I supposed to call you then? Dr. Sterling, I said, my back still to him. Or nothing at all. I walked away, leaving him standing in the middle of a hallway filled with the histories of people he would never be skilled enough to heal. Over the next month, Sophie became my only window into his new, shrunken world. She visited him on his supervised Sundays and reported back to me with the brutal honesty only an 8-year-old possesses. Daddy's apartment is so small, Grandpa. Ah, she told me while we made pancakes one Saturday. And he has a new cat. He named it Hope. The irony was almost painful. Does he ask about me, Sophie? He asks if you'll ever forgive him. I told him I didn't know. Will you? I don't know either, sweetheart. Another time she mentioned him crying when he spoke about her grandmother Margaret. He says he wishes she was here to help him. He says he misses her. I thought of Margaret. She would have been heartbroken, yes, but she was the daughter of a judge. She believed in consequences as much as she believed in love. She would have stood by the truth, even if it meant watching her son fall. He says he sees you at the hospital sometimes, Sophie added. I know. Do you talk to him? No. Why not? You're both sad. Isn't that a reason to talk? I looked at her innocent face and wished the world was as simple as she wanted it to be. But sadness isn't a bridge. It's just a symptom. Trust is the foundation, and Julian had dynamited ours into dust. Marcus Whitaker sent me a brief update later that month. Julian asked about you last week, asked if you were healthy. I told him yes. He just said good and went back to work. He's bitter, Arthur. He complains about the labor, but he shows up on time. Only because the shadow of a prison cell is hanging over him, though. Not because he wants to be there. That was the crux of it. Julian was performing humility because it was a court requirement, not a soul-deep realization. As November bled into a cold-biting winter, Julian worked his shifts and I worked mine. We circled each other in that hospital like distant planets connected by the gravity of our shared past, but never touching. Occasionally, I would see him mopping the very floors I had traversed hours earlier. Occasionally, he would see me at the head of a line of residents teaching them the sacred responsibility of the blade. Each of us was a walking reminder to the other of what had been lost, what had been chosen, what could never be taken back. We remained separated by a chasm of silence, two strangers occupying a building that bore my name, but only one of us truly understood what the name was worth. Exactly 1 year after Julian's disastrous anniversary party, I stood on a different stage. Same month, different ceremony. This time, the celebration was for me. And this time, My son was watching from the shadows. The grand ballroom of Memorial Hospital was a sea of crystal chandeliers, white linens, and high-stakes prestige. Over 500 guests, the elite of the medical world, philanthropists, and city officials, filled the space. I sat at the head table, flanked by the hospital board and the directors of the Margaret Sterling Foundation. My back was straight, my mind clear, yet my eyes instinctively drifted toward the very last row near the service entrance. There he was. Julian. He had slipped in quietly, wearing that same discount suit that now hung even looser on his frame. He sat alone, a ghost at the feast, thinking he was invisible. I saw him, though. I saw the way he looked at the stage, not with the predatory ambition of a year ago, but with a hollow, aching exhaustion. I wondered if he felt the irony of sitting so close to the same doors I had walked through as a server at his house. The master of ceremonies approached the podium. Tonight we honor Dr. Arthur Sterling, 40 years of service, over 3,000 surgeries, 47 patents, but numbers cannot capture the soul of this man. A tribute video began to play. It was a montage of my life's work, grainy footage of my early days in the OR, photos of me teaching wide-eyed residents and interviews with patients whose lives had been returned to them. He saved my father. One woman said, tears in her eyes. He gave me back my son, said another. Then came the work of the foundation. Over $58 million raised. Over 10,000 children helped. Notable in its absence was any mention of Julian. I had made that a non-negotiable condition. My public legacy was now surgically detached from the man who had tried to harvest it. I looked toward the middle of the room. Sophie was there, sitting with Clarissa and her new husband, a man named Robert Vance, who seemed kind enough. Sophie caught my eye and held up a sign she had made with crayons. That's my grandpa. I managed to smile, my heart aching with a bittersweet joy. To present this award, the MC announced, is someone who knows Dr. Sterling better than most, Dr. David Martinez. David stepped onto the stage, no longer the orphan in a catering uniform, but a confident surgical resident in a crisp white coat. 20 years ago, I was nobody. David began, his voice echoing through the silent hall. A kid in a state-run home, no family, no future, but this man showed up every Saturday. He read to us, he believed in us. He paid for my medical school, and today, I am a resident at this very hospital. David paused, looking out at the crowd. And I am not alone. If Dr. Sterling has helped you, if he has been the father you didn't have, please stand up. Slowly, from every corner of the ballroom, people began to rise. 1 by 1, 10, 20, 43. 43 former orphans, now doctors, nurses, teachers, and engineers, stood in a silent, powerful testament to a legacy that money couldn't buy. The applause that followed was like thunder. I looked at the back row. Julian was still there, his head down, shoulders shaking. He was finally seeing what he had rejected. A father who had given everything to strangers because his own son had refused to value the gift. Then Carmen Rodriguez joined David on stage. She was 15 now, tall and poised. The room went deathly quiet. They knew the story of Maria Rodriguez. Dr. Sterling met my family during our darkest hour, she said, her voice clear. He didn't just give us a trust fund. He gave us hope. Because of him, I am starting pre-med this fall. My mother would have loved him. She handed me a framed photo of Maria laughing with her 3 children. I hugged Carmen, and for a moment, the weight of 1,000 surgeries and a year of betrayal felt lighter. The standing ovation lasted for 3 full minutes. I glanced back one last time. Julian's seat was empty. He had vanished during Carmen's speech, unable to bear the light of a truth that exposed his own darkness. I stepped to the microphone, steadying my breath. Thank you. I don't feel worthy of this. I have simply tried to live by one rule. First, do no harm. My wife Margaret taught me that healing isn't just surgery. It's presence. It's caring. I glanced at the empty chair in the back row. I have made mistakes. I failed people I loved. I prioritized the hospital over my home. My voice faltered, then strengthened. But I have tried to learn. Margaret used to say, we are not measured by what we accumulate, but by what we give away. I have given away most of my money and most of my time, and I have never felt richer than I do tonight. To the 43 of you standing, you are my legacy. Not the patents, not the buildings. You. To the Rodriguez family, your mother's memory drives me every day. And to my granddaughter, Sophie, You are my sunshine. Never forget that." The applause followed me off the stage. Later, after the handshakes and the photos, I found a plain white envelope tucked under my seat at the head table. No name, just 3 words written in Julian's hurried, familiar script. "I am sorry." I held it for a long time. I didn't feel a rush of forgiveness. I felt an acknowledgement. Some apologies arrive too late to rebuild a bridge, but they are enough to finally stop the fire. I tucked it into my pocket. I drove home that night, passing the turnoff for the Hamptons. The estate had been sold months ago to pay the fines and the settlements. A new family lived there. Now I'd seen the toys on the lawn and the warm light in the windows. It was a home again, not a museum of lies. Julian had moved 3 times since his sentencing, each apartment smaller than the last. He was living a small life, now mopping floors and filing papers, bound by the requirements of his probation. Whether he was truly learning or just surviving, I didn't know, and I didn't need to know. His journey was now his own. Mine had finally peacefully diverged. 3 years. That is how much time has passed since that anniversary party in the Hamptons. I am 73 years old now. Julian is 45. We work in the same building. We live in the same city. We share the same granddaughter. And we have not spoken a single word to each other in 1,095 days. I count every one of them. Not because I am waiting for a reconciliation, but because I want to remember some choices are permanent. I am at the Riverside Outreach Center, a habit I will never break. I'm sitting on the floor with a dozen children, ages 4 to 8, gathered on the rug around me. We are reading The Giving Tree. "Mr. Arthur," a small boy asks, his brow furrowed, "why did the tree give everything away?" "Because to love means to give even when it costs you," I tell him, closing the book. But the tree was sad at the end. "The tree was tired, son," I say softly, but not sad. There is a big difference. After the reading, I walk through the new wing of the center, the Margaret and Maria wing. I run my hand over the brass plaque, a silent whisper to the air. I kept my promise. I drive to Memorial Hospital later. I still work 2 days a week supervising surgical residents. As I walk through the main lobby, I pass a man in a Navy maintenance supervisor's uniform. He's organizing a crew for a floor repair. It's Julian. He was promoted from janitor to supervisor last year, a reward for his punctuality and lack of complaints. Our eyes meet. He gives a small, stiff nod. I nod back. Not a word. 3 years of silence compressed into 2 seconds of eye contact. David Martinez, now a chief surgical resident, joins me. "Doctor, Sterling ready for rounds?" "Ready, David." We walk together. He asks questions. I teach. It is the rhythmic, honest dance of a mentor and a protege. It is the relationship Julian discarded, and David claimed. A father-son bond forged in work and integrity, rather than blood and expectation. Sophie comes to my apartment every Saturday before she spends Sunday with Julian. At 11, she is tall, observant, and possesses a wisdom that Julian never found. "Daddy still has that cat, Hope," she tells me, while we look at her school projects. "He says he's sorry for making you sad. He works hard now, Grandpa. He's very quiet." "Does he still ask about me, Sophie?" "He asks if you'll ever forgive him. I told him I didn't know. Will you?" "I don't know either, Sophie." Through Ethan, who still manages Neural Tech Innovations, I hear the practical details. Julian finished his probation last year. He pays his rent on time. He lives alone in that studio in Queens. Clarissa has moved on completely. She's remarried to a lawyer named Robert Whitaker, and they have a toddler now. Sophie has a half-sister, and oddly enough, Julian attends all of Sophie's school plays. He sits in the very back row, alone. Ethan tells me Julian volunteers at a soup kitchen every Thursday. Sincerely, not by court order. 2 years ago, Julian sent me a long, handwritten letter. I never opened it. It still sits in the back of my desk drawer, the paper slightly yellowed. "He asked about you last week," Ethan said recently. "Asked if your heart was still strong. I told him yes. He just said good and walked away." "I think he's broken, Arthur," Ethan added. "Not just disciplined, broken." "It doesn't matter," I replied. "He is living with his consequences. That is enough." But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wonder if it is enough. Then I remember the face of Maria Rodriguez. I remember the 127 complaints, the patients who can't walk or breathe right because he wanted a faster profit. And I stop wondering. This past Saturday, I visited Margaret's grave. I brought purple iris as her favorite. I sat on the stone bench nearby, talking to her as I always do. Margaret, you'd probably tell me to forgive him, I whispered. But I can't. I've tried. I just can't. The sound of a car door made me turn. It was Julian's old Honda parked 10 yards away. He stepped out holding a bunch of white lilies. He froze when he saw me. The silence stretched long and uncomfortable. I didn't know you'd be here, Julian said, his voice sandpaper rough. It's Saturday. I'm always here on Saturdays. I know. I usually come on Sundays. Today. I just felt like I needed to come. She's buried under the oaks, I said, my back to him. You remember? I remember. I stood up to leave. As I passed him, he spoke again. Arthur. He didn't call me Dad. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I just wanted to say, Mom would be ashamed of me. I know that now. Yes, I said. She would be. Are you happy, Arthur, without me? I turned to face him then. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the headstones. Yes, I said firmly. I am. Without you in my life, there is peace. There is no looking over my shoulder for the next lie. There is no weight of your expectations. I am happy. Julian flinched as if I'd slapped him again. I'm sorry. I hope you find your peace, Julian, truly. But you won't find it through me. Will you ever? No. You didn't let me finish the sentence. I know what you were going to ask. I interrupted. The answer is no. Some doors once closed stay closed. I wish you well, Julian, but I wish you well from a great distance. I began to walk away. I am still your son. He shouted after me, his voice echoing through the quiet cemetery. I didn't turn back. I kept walking toward my car, because he isn't. Not in any way that matters. DNA makes a biological connection. Choices make a family. He chose to be a stranger to my values, my work, and my heart a long time ago. I just finally accepted his choice. I drove away from that cemetery and didn't look in the rearview mirror. Margaret might have wanted me to forgive him, but Margaret isn't here to clean up the wreckage he left behind. I am. And I have spent 3 years learning that love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling. I enabled him for 42 years. The moment I stopped, he fell, and that tells me everything I need to know. Sitting alone, I realize God tests us through those we love most. My life is a family story of surgical precision, but domestic failure. I loved without boundaries, unknowingly fueling a massive family betrayal. My advice: do not be like me. Don't wait 40 years to realize that providing isn't enough. You must demand integrity. My silence was the oxygen for Julian's lies. This family story proves that while blood binds us, only character sustains us. I've learned that the ultimate act of love is letting someone face their own wreckage. In every family story, there is a line between supporting and enabling. I crossed it, resulting in a family betrayal that cost a life. This family betrayal taught me that forgiveness is for the repentant, but distance is for the wise. Character is destiny, and some wounds simply cannot be stitched back together. What are your thoughts on family boundaries? Please comment, share your views, and subscribe for more insightful stories. Thank you for watching until the very end. Warning: future stories contain fictional elements for educational purposes. If these deep reflections aren't for you, please feel free to explore other content.